I got loyalty, got royalty inside my DNA. I got love, peace, got war and peace inside my DNA. I got joy and pain and joy inside my DNA.
Hello and welcome back to my channel, Fanfic Fantasy. Join us as we delve into the realms of fanfiction and fantasy, bringing you the best stories and discussions. Today, we're kicking off the final part of our series, What If a Player Was in JJK with Level Up System? If you enjoy this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content in the future. The author of this story is Deck302005. From Wattpad, all the relevant links are in the description. Feel free to say hello to the author on their profile. Now, let's dive into the fanfic. What had transpired outside while Mahito reveled in his twisted victory? What had turned a stoic sorcerer into a puppet master of playful chaos, directing his shadow soldiers in a bizarre dance with the strongest being in existence? The question hung heavy, unanswered, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Was this a strategic move, a carefully orchestrated distraction? Or was it something more, a glimpse into the unexpected depths of their relationship, a display of unorthodox power born from a strange mix of rivalry and respect? The playful chaos took a sharp turn. Gojo's widened eyes reflected not just surprise, but a flicker of genuine concern as Kenzo's voice boomed through the air. Now ... all of y'all use domain amplification. The harmless jumps morphed into something far more dangerous. With the activation of domain amplification, the shadow soldiers, typically confined by Gojo's infinity, now bypassed the barrier, their attacks landing with surprising force. Gojo, caught off guard, stumbled back under the onslaught. A laugh escaped Mahito's lips, a twisted melody fueled by amusement and unexpected delight. Gojo, the invincible being, was finally vulnerable, his playful facade replaced by a mix of irritation and begrudging respect for his students' ingenuity. The scene unfolded in a flurry of movement. Kenzo, with a smirk playing on his lips, watched as his shadow soldiers, empowered by the domain amplification, rained down blows upon Gojo. Gojo, his infinity temporarily breached, countered with bursts of cursed energy, sending some soldiers flying while dodging others with uncanny agility. A cruel smile stretched across Kenzo's face as he observed Gojo's predicament. The playful jabs and harmless jumps had morphed into a relentless barrage, each amplified blow sending the six-eyed king reeling. With each successful strike, Kenzo's amusement grew, his voice dripping with a hint of sadistic satisfaction. "How does it feel, huh, sensei? Doesn't feel so good now, does it, being on the receiving end?" His voice echoed with a mocking lilt, each word a jab at Gojo's usual dominance. Gojo, despite his surprise and momentary struggle, quickly regained his composure. A playful glint flickered in his eyes, replacing the irritation with a hint of amusement. "Taunting me already, student? Aren't you scared of a one-on-one?" Kenzo met his gaze, his smirk unwavering. "Scared? It's my ability, and I'm using it. Is there anything wrong with that, sensei? Or would you prefer I hold back? After all, we wouldn't want to spoil the fun, would we?" His voice dripped with sarcasm, each word laced with the memory of countless sparring sessions where Gojo had effortlessly dominated. This was his moment, his chance to return the favor, to relish the tables turning. The scene crackled with an electrifying tension, a bizarre blend of playful rivalry and genuine challenge. Gojo, despite being momentarily outmaneuvered, wasn't defeated. He saw the opportunity, the chance to test Kenzo's limits, to push him further. Divided by N... Did y'all think his petness would go away after he became the Shadow Monarch? He is still quite salty about it. While y'all waiting for Tomorrow chapter, y'all can the Anomaly series trust even if the setting is in Kamen Rider. I promise y'all will really love him. Hey Aaron," she replied, her cheeks slightly flushed. "I didn't expect to see you here. What brings you to my stream?" Aaron leaned in slightly, adopting an exaggerated tone of flirtatiousness. "Well, isn't it a special day today, Neon-chan? I heard it's your birthday, and I couldn't resist dropping by to wish you a personal happy birthday." Neon chuckled nervously, clearly taken aback by Aaron's unexpected appearance and playful demeanor. "Yeah, it is my birthday. Thanks for the wishes, Aaron." Aaron grinned, enjoying the reaction he was getting. "Of course, Neon-chan. I mean, how could I forget the birthday of the famous Neon Kurama? I have a very special present for you." Her eyes seemed excitant as if she wasn't expecting this from him. He smiled at her before looking at the comment on her video asking who was he. As Aaron left Neon's stream, he couldn't help but chuckle at the comments flooding in, all asking about him. It seemed he had piqued the curiosity of Neon's fans. Well, he muttered to himself. "Looks like I've become a mystery guest star in the Neon Kurama show." He decided to have a little fun with it and left a playful comment. "Omi, no one special, just Neon's boyfriend." Aaron's comment set off a flurry of reactions in the chat, with viewers expressing everything from shock to excitement. It seemed he had unintentionally started a mini firestorm. Neon's blush deepened as she fumbled to respond. What? No way. Aaron, stop teasing me. She tried to laugh it off, but her flustered reaction was unmistakable. Upon seeing Neon flushed cheeks and the fact that the comments seemed to be pouring, Aaron's smile saying, "Y'all are quick to judge. I said I am her boyfriend. I am a boy and I am her friend." "Silly me," Aaron said, playfully hitting his head. He laughed a bit to himself before noticing that her mood seemed to have improved. Good for her. Although he notices Neon's phone ringing soon after. He heard something about staying far away from this thing, which he assumed was Neon's mom. Aaron couldn't help but smirk as he overheard Neon's phone conversation. It seemed her mother had some reservations about him being around. He didn't take it personally, it was rather amusing, actually. As he walked away, he couldn't resist leaving a parting comment in the chat. "Neon, tell your mom I promise not to bite much," although he could hear Neon's mom from the other side and she seemed not to trust his words. The call ended with Neon just saying okay. Kenzo's grin stretched wide as his shadow soldiers swarmed Gojo. Each blow, propelled by his potent mana reserves, chipped away at the six-eyed king's playful demeanor. This wasn't just about revenge, it was a strategic showcase of his growth, a dance within the chaos of battle. Suddenly, a shift. Gojo's playful mask vanished, replaced by an icy focus. A burst of his signature limitless technique erupted, sending several shadows flying. But Kenzo, anticipating this, commanded two shadows to merge, creating a hulking monstrosity. It lunged at Gojo, its mass enough to momentarily disrupt the limitless barrier. Kenzo seized the opportunity. His fist, infused with his surging mana, connected with Gojo's jaw, snapping the six-eyed king's head back with a sickening crack. A stunned silence descended upon the warehouse. But Gojo, ever the enigma, grinned, blood trickling down his chin. "Not bad, student," he chuckled, wiping away the crimson stain. "Seems you've learned a thing or two about exploiting weaknesses." The playful facade returned, but a hint of respect flickered in his eyes. Kenzo, however, remained stoic. This was no time for celebrations. A mischievous glint flickered in Gojo's eyes despite the barrage of shadow punches. While Kenzo chuckled, enjoying the sight of his teacher overwhelmed, Gojo saw an opportunity. His limitless technique, usually a passive barrier, transformed into a strategic weapon. With a flick of his wrist, he activated Maximum, Cursed Reversal. As shadow soldiers collided with his infinity, their mana, instead of harmlessly bouncing off, reversed its flow, surging back towards them. Suddenly, the shadows stumbled, their own power turning against them. Some even exploded, dissolving into wisps of dark energy. Kenzo's laughter died in his throat. His amusement quickly morphed into surprise as his army faltered. Gojo, with a playful smirk, moved in for the counteroffensive. He unleashed a precise burst of blue, curse technique lapse. This negative energy attraction pulled the remaining shadows towards him, clumping them together into a dense, writhing mass. Kenzo, caught off guard, was engulfed in his own creation. "Fun's over, student," Gojo taunted, his voice laced with amusement but also a touch of respect. The warehouse crackled with tension as Kenzo issued his command. "All right, guess you're stronger than my lower-ranking soldiers. Igris, Malgrim, Hanami, Choso. You're allowed to use your full might against him." The atmosphere thickened as Igris, Kenzo's loyal knight and right-hand man, stepped forward, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over Gojo. Malgrim, the demonic general, emerged from the darkness, his oversized axe glinting in the dim light, a feral grin splitting his face. Two figures in the forefront drew Gojo's immediate attention. Hanami, the embodiment of winter, stood tall, her massive tan form adorned with black lines, a helmet-like head revealing rows of sharp teeth. Where eyes should be, branches swayed, sensing the surrounding energy. Black lines zigzagged down her face, a stark contrast to the white cloth draped across her left arm. Its fingers tipped with black. A single, vibrant flower bloomed on her left shoulder. Beside her stood Choso, but a dark reflection conjured by Kenzo's shadow magic. His black skin shimmered with faint hints of purple, mirroring Hanami's own markings. His long, stringy black hair spiked upwards in two high ponytails, framing his small, dark purple eyes. Blood markings, mirroring those on the original Choso, stretched across his face and nose, pulsing with potential cursed energy. He wore a loose, light tan robe underneath a purple gi vest, and a matching scarf adorned his neck. Noticing the three black and blue figures surrounding him, their imposing forms contrasting his own white hair and delicate features, Gojo, ever the provocateur, couldn't resist a quip. "Damn, didn't think you were that kinky," he said with a playful smile, raising an eyebrow suggestively. Kenzo's eye twitched. He ignored the comment, focusing on the task at hand. "Attack," he commanded, and the warehouse erupted in chaos. Igris charged, his sword singing. Malvrum roared, his axe a blur aimed to cleave Gojo in two. Hanami, channeling her cursed energy, conjured thorny vines that lashed out with surprising speed. And Choso, using blood manipulation, hardened his blood into razor-sharp projectiles, aiming them at Gojo's blind spots. Gojo, despite his playful demeanor, moved with lightning speed. He deflected Igris's attack, used blue to redirect Malvrum's axe, and countered Hanami's vines with a burst of red, forcing them to wither and crumble. Yet, Choso's blood projectiles, propelled by dark magic, surprised Gojo, slicing through his infinity barrier and grazing his arm. Gojo stumbled back, a rare flicker of surprise on his face. The student he once trained had grown powerful, wielding techniques amplified by Kenzo's shadow magic. The playful dance was over, this was a serious fight. The clash continued, a whirlwind of power and movement. Gojo, pushed to his limits, fought with focused intensity. Kenzo, seeing an opening, rallied his remaining shadow soldiers. Their dark tendrils swarmed Gojo, restricting his movements. Gojo, weakened and trapped, finally seemed vulnerable. A smirk played on Kenzo's lips. But would this be victory, or would Gojo find another way to escape, showcasing the true depth of his limitless technique? Gojo, surrounded by Kenzo's formidable forces, found himself in a precarious situation. Igris, with his infinity-piercing blade, was a constant threat, while Choso's blood-manipulated projectiles chipped away at his defenses. And Hanami, wielding her disaster plants, conjured thorny vines and monstrous flowers that lashed through the air, aiming to ensnare Gojo. But Gojo wasn't known for giving up easily. His limitless, while not an absolute shield, held immense potential. He began to strategize, weaving his techniques into an intricate dance of offense and defense. With a flick of his wrist, Gojo activated Blue, Curse Technique Lapse. This negative energy attraction pulled Malvrum's axe off course, sending it crashing into a nearby crate. He then followed it up with Red, Curse Technique Reversal, amplifying the impact and shattering the crate into shrapnel. The shrapnel, imbued with reverse cursed energy, became makeshift projectiles, flying towards Hanami, forcing her to conjure a barrier of thorny vines for protection. This maneuver bought Gojo some breathing room. He focused on Igris, the most immediate threat. His infinity barrier wouldn't hold against the knight's cursed blade. But Gojo had another idea. With a flick of his wrist, Gojo unleashed a burst of azure energy towards Igris. The knight, anticipating the blue technique, leaped back with surprising agility. Gojo smirked, then directed a crimson blast of red, Curse Technique Reversal at Choso, forcefully pushing him away. The sniper threat neutralized, Gojo turned his attention to the berserker Malvrum. He knew Kenzo and his shadow soldiers wouldn't fall for Hollow Purple, an attack that erases anything it touches. Instead, he focused the waning energy of his previous blue technique, chanting silently. Each word resonated with power, amplifying the technique's pull, phase, twilight, eyes of wisdom. The once gentle blue aura intensified, becoming a swirling vortex of attraction. Simultaneously, Gojo let loose a guttural roar, uttering another incantation, phase, Paramita, Pillars of Light. The crimson energy from his earlier red attack reversed its trajectory, hurtling back towards Malvrum with amplified force. This unexpected blow caught the demonic general off guard, sending him careening towards the strengthened blue vortex. As Malvrum neared the pull, Gojo concluded his final chant with a mischievous smile, 9 ropes, polarized light, crow of liberation, between front and back. In an instant, the warehouse erupted in a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar. The air itself seemed to tear apart, the raw power shattering Tenjin's barrier like fragile glass. Light, 1,000 suns condensed into a singular point, engulfed the warehouse. The deafening roar ripped through the air, tearing apart Tenjin's barrier like a wet tissue. Debris exploded outwards, propelled by the raw power Gojo unleashed. Kenzo, with his honed instincts, felt the shift in energy moments before the detonation. Instead of horror, a grim determination settled on his face. With a flick of his wrist, a ripple of shadow energy engulfed him, teleporting him just outside the attack's radius. He landed hard on the rubble, coughing, his cloak singed at the edges. Gojo, the epicenter of the blast, wasn't entirely unscathed. He stood tall, chest heaving, white hair slightly singed around the edges. A thin sheen of sweat covered his brow, a testament to the immense power he'd channeled. Despite the evident strain, a satisfied smirk played on his lips. "Looks like playtime's over, wouldn't you agree, Kenzo?" His voice rang out, laced with a hint of challenge. The warehouse was gone, replaced by a crater smoldering with residual cursed energy. The battlefield had shifted, the once playful dance replaced by a brutal reality. Gojo, wounded but undeterred, stood amidst the ruins, awaiting Kenzo's next move. Kenzo's voice, devoid of fear, echoed through the smoke-filled crater. "Fine, if you want to play rough, then let's do this." He didn't teleport, opting instead to charge at Gojo in a display of raw power. His dark form blurred as he closed the distance, his movements honed by years of combat. Gojo met the challenge head-on. His limitless hummed around him, ready to deflect any blow. Kenzo's first strike, a powerful haymaker aimed at Gojo's jaw, seemed destined to connect. But as it neared its target, Gojo's body flickered, seemingly teleporting a fraction of an inch away. The punch slammed into empty air, the wind whistling harmlessly past Gojo's ear. Gojo retaliated with a swift kick aimed at Kenzo's knee, hoping to disrupt his momentum. But before it connected, a ripple of dark energy emanated from Kenzo's hand, warping the space around the kick. Gojo's foot passed through the distorted space, missing its mark entirely. Kenzo capitalized on the opening, launching a flurry of punches and kicks, each one imbued with the same gravity manipulation. Gojo danced through the assault, his limitless activated and pushing its limits. He used blue to absorb Kenzo's attacks, redirecting their force harmlessly away. He attempted red to reverse the gravity manipulation, but Kenzo's counter was instantaneous, negating the effect with his own dark energy. The clash became a chaotic spectacle of speed, power, and nullification. Gojo, despite his best efforts, felt the strain. The constant nullification of his techniques was draining his cursed energy. He knew he couldn't sustain this for long. He needed a new strategy, a way to break through Kenzo's defenses. His eyes narrowed as he focused on Kenzo's movements. He noticed a subtle tremor in Kenzo's hands whenever he activated his gravity manipulation. It was minuscule, almost undetectable, but Gojo's keen senses caught it. This was his opening. Gojo feigned a lunging attack. As Kenzo reacted, activating his gravity manipulation, Gojo instead dropped to the ground, rolling beneath Kenzo's outstretched arm. The tremor in Kenzo's hand was more pronounced this time, momentary but undeniable. Seizing the opportunity, Gojo unleashed a burst of maximum, cursed reversal, not at Kenzo directly, but at the space around his hand where the tremor originated. The effect was subtle, a brief disruption in the flow of cursed energy. For a split second, Kenzo's gravity manipulation faltered. Gojo, with lightning speed, launched himself up, his fist imbued with red, cursed technique reversal. The punch, empowered and unopposed, connected squarely with Kenzo's jaw. The impact sent a shockwave through the air, kicking up dust and debris. Kenzo stumbled back, momentarily stunned. Gojo, his white hair whipped by the wind, stood poised, a flicker of triumph in his eyes. Gojo, a whirlwind of white hair and boundless confidence, weaved through Kenzo's relentless assault. Blows rained down, each one imbued with the dark energy of gravity manipulation. But Gojo's limitless technique held firm. He deflected, absorbed, and reversed, a dance of blue and red blurring around him. Kenzo, however, wasn't just brute force. He observed, analyzed, and adapted. He noticed a pattern in Gojo's movements, a subtle hesitation before each blue absorption, a near imperceptible twitch before a red reversal. It was the telltale sign of a finite reserve, even for the limitless Gojo. With a sly grin, Kenzo feinted a powerful right hook, the tremor in his hand a familiar cue to Gojo. But instead of activating gravity manipulation, Kenzo channeled his dark energy differently. The air shimmered, and Gojo, anticipating the nullification, instinctively activated blue. But there was no gravity to absorb. Instead, Kenzo had manipulated the space itself, creating a localized fold that sent Gojo hurtling through the air, disoriented and momentarily separated from his infinity barrier. Kenzo seized the opportunity. With a surge of dark energy, he conjured a massive hand of swirling shadows, its grip imbued with the crushing force of a collapsing star. It slammed towards the vulnerable Gojo, who scrambled to reactivate his barrier. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the air. Gojo's infinity flickered, almost breached, the strain etched on his face. He had been outsmarted, his predictable reactions exploited. The air crackled with unspoken tension as Gojo and Kenzo squared off. Gone were the flashy techniques and cursed energy manipulation. This was a battle of raw skill, a brutal ballet of bone and muscle. Gojo, ever the showman, adopted a relaxed stance, his white hair dancing in the faint breeze. His movements were fluid, almost effortless, a deceptive facade for the lightning-fast strikes his limitless technique concealed. Kenzo, in stark contrast, mirrored a coiled viper, his dark form coiled with barely contained power. His movements were precise, economical, each step and strike honed by years of brutal combat. The first exchange was a blur. Gojo, a whirlwind of white, launched a side kick aiming for Kenzo's knee. Kenzo, with a near imperceptible shift, dropped low, the kick sailing harmlessly over his head. He countered with a rising elbow, aimed at Gojo's solar plexus. Gojo, seemingly caught off guard, twisted his torso at the last moment, the elbow grazing his ribs. The dance continued, a kaleidoscope of strikes and counters. Gojo, relying on his agility and reflexes, weaved through Kenzo's attacks, landing glancing blows that sent ripples through the air. Kenzo, his dark form a blur, blocked and parried with pinpoint precision, each counter imbued with the weight of a collapsing mountain. The tension mounted with each clash. Gojo's playful demeanor began to fade, replaced by a focused intensity. His strikes, though still fast, carried more weight, testing Kenzo's defenses. Kenzo, in turn, unleashed a flurry of vicious attacks, his dark energy crackling around him, pushing Gojo on the back foot. The turning point came in a seemingly innocuous exchange. Gojo, feinting a right punch, aimed a powerful kick at Kenzo's midsection. Kenzo, anticipating the kick, shifted his weight, preparing to block. But Gojo, in a split-second decision, switched targets, his foot connecting with Kenzo's jaw with a sickening crunch. Kenzo stumbled back, momentarily stunned. Gojo, seizing the opportunity, unleashed a barrage of punches and kicks, each one fueled by his limitless technique. But Kenzo, fueled by pain and fury, retaliated with a ferocity that surprised even Gojo. He blocked, countered, and landed blows of his own, the fight descending into a brutal brawl. Their movements became a blur, the air thick with the scent of sweat and blood. Gojo, his white hair stained crimson, pushed his limits, but Kenzo, his dark form a whirlwind of fury, wouldn't be denied. In a final, desperate lunge, Kenzo delivered a brutal uppercut, connecting with Gojo's jaw. The blow sent Gojo crashing to the ground, unmoving. Kenzo, his chest heaving, stood over him, his dark energy crackling around him. The battle, against all odds, was his. So, sensei, Kenzo rasped, a chilling grin stretching across his bruised face. The air was thick with dust and the metallic tang of blood, remnants of their brutal hand-to-hand skirmish. Gojo, hair disheveled and crimson staining his once pristine white hair, struggled to his feet. "How does it feel?" Kenzo continued, his voice dripping with dark amusement, "knowing that you're losing, and your precious students still haven't unleashed their full potential. Such wasted power, wouldn't you agree?" Gojo chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that echoed through the ruined warehouse. "Losing," he drawled, wiping a trickle of blood from his lip. "You flatter yourself, Kenzo. This little dance has just begun. How do you plan to win anyway?" Kenzo growled, his voice laced with frustration. He had pushed Gojo to his limits, yet the white-haired sorcerer remained unfazed, his playful demeanor a constant thorn in Kenzo's side. Gojo's smile widened, an infuriating glint in his eyes. "With this," he declared, raising a single hand. Kenzo squinted, bracing himself for another attack. He expected a surge of cursed energy, a flash of blue or red. Instead, Gojo simply extended his middle finger. Kenzo's eyes narrowed. For a moment, he thought it was a mistake, a twitch of Gojo's hand. But the smug smile plastered on the sorcerer's face confirmed it. Gojo was flipping him off. A wave of annoyance washed over Kenzo. A smirk played on Kenzo's lips, tinged with both frustration and a gambler's desperation. Domain expansion. Realm of the Obsidian Sovereign. The air crackled as dark energy erupted from him, swirling and twisting outwards, enveloping the ruined warehouse in an Inkai cloak. Within this domain, the very fabric of reality warped to Kenzo's will, shadows danced to his command, and gravity became his plaything. Gojo, however, remained unfazed. He stood amidst the swirling darkness, his white hair a beacon against the encroaching shadows. He tilted his head, a playful glint in his eyes. Domain expansion, huh, fancy, but the casualness in his voice didn't quite mask a flicker of curiosity. Kenzo, after all, hadn't revealed his domain's true power before. "It ain't that deep," Gojo continued, his voice laced with amusement. "Though, gotta admit, the shadows are a nice touch. Reminds me of a bad horror movie I saw once. The acting was atrocious, by the way." Kenzo's domain pressed down, shadows coiling and constricting, gravity crushing the air itself. Gojo, for the first time, seemed serious. The playful mask slipped, replaced by a focused intensity. He couldn't afford to underestimate Kenzo's domain, not when sure hits were on the table. With a murmured chant, Gojo's white hair began to ripple, the air around him vibrating with unseen energy. The shadows danced erratically, as if sensing a tremor in the very fabric of reality. Then, with a burst of blinding light, a new domain unfolded. Domain expansion. Infinite void, Gojo declared, his voice echoing within the confines of his own construct. As Gojo looked inside Kenzo domain, he noticed that they were in the middle of a battlefield with the body of thousands of people on the floor. "Welcome to my domain, Sensei," Kenzo said, looking at Gojo with a smile. Inside of this domain, you are under my control, Kenzo said with a grin. Have you forgotten that we were clashing? You don't have access to your sure hit, don't you? Gojo said with a smile, to which Gojo replied, you lost the second I opened my domain, Kenzo said, looking Gojo, who looked at him for a bit before saying, we aren't clashing, are we? Gojo said, to which Kenzo just smiled. You won the clash the second my domain appeared, didn't you? Gojo added, to which Kenzo just smiled before saying, aren't you just a smart cookie? Kenzo scoffed, a hint of arrogance creeping into his voice. Sure, your domain might have crumbled a bit quicker if I'd amped my domain up a notch, he conceded, feigning nonchalance. But the end result wouldn't have changed, would it, sensei? Gojo's gaze remained unwavering, his amusement morphing into a knowing smirk. You're holding back, aren't you, Kenzo? He countered, his voice laced with a playful challenge. Kenzo's smirk widened, his eyes sparkling with a competitive glint. Bingo, he exclaimed, relishing the realization dawning on Gojo's face. This entire fight, I haven't even broken a sweat. Consider it a mere 25% effort on my part. The revelation sent a surge of pride through Kenzo. He had not only pushed Gojo to his limits but had done so while holding back a significant portion of his own power. It was a testament to his growth and a display of his potential. Gojo's response, however, surprised Kenzo once again. Instead of anger or frustration, a genuine smile, warm and unexpected, spread across his face. It was a smile that spoke volumes, a silent acknowledgement of Kenzo's impressive feat. You did well, Kenzo, Gojo declared, his voice filled with genuine admiration. Kenzo, caught off guard by the unexpected praise, stammered in response. Are you all right, Satoru? He questioned, unsure of how to interpret his sensei's uncharacteristic display of emotion. Gojo simply maintained his warm smile. I admit, he conceded, his voice calm and collected, you bested me fair and square. The air crackled with a newfound respect, a silent acknowledgement of Kenzo's remarkable feat. With a flourish, Kenzo deactivated his domain. The grotesque battlefield dissolved, replaced by the familiar sight of the Jujutsu High training grounds. The oppressive energy lifted, leaving behind a sense of normalcy, albeit one tinged with the weight of their recent encounter. Gojo, his expression unreadable, stepped forward and landed a playful pat on Kenzo's shoulder. You did well, Kenzo, he repeated, a hint of pride in his voice. But remember, this doesn't make you the strongest. Enjoy the title while it lasts, because I'll be taking it back eventually. Kenzo grinned, unfazed by Gojo's playful challenge. Just try it, dumbass, he retorted, his voice laced with playful defiance. The air crackled with a sense of friendly competition, a testament to the unique bond they shared. As if responding to Kenzo's words, the air shimmered around them. Purple portals, like rents in the fabric of reality, began to materialize around the Tenjin barrier. From these portals, an army of shadow soldiers emerged, their forms coalescing from the Inkai darkness. Dragons soared through the air, their wings casting vast shadows. Knights in imposing armor materialized, their weapons glinting menacingly. Archers knocked arrows onto their bows, their eyes fixed on unseen targets. The training grounds were transformed into a battlefield, teeming with Kenzo's formidable army. Gojo's eyes widened slightly in surprise, a hint of amusement flickering in their depths. He turned to Kenzo, a single question hanging in the air. Are those shadow soldiers yours, Kenzo? He inquired, his voice laced with curiosity. Kenzo, a mischievous glint in his eyes, simply met his gaze and uttered a single, enigmatic word. No. Kenzo approached the towering shadow creature, his hand instinctively slipping into his pocket. He wasn't naive, these beings were formidable, and if they posed a threat, he wouldn't hesitate to send them back to the void. Despite the creature's imposing size, Kenzo held his ground, his gaze unwavering. Just as he braced himself for a fight, the unexpected happened. The colossal creature bowed deeply, its voice resonating with a thunderous respect. Grand Marshal Bellion, it boomed, its words laced with reverence. We offer our unwavering loyalty and respect to our liege, the Shadow Monarch. Kenzo's heart skipped a beat. The realization dawned on him like a bolt of lightning. These weren't just any shadow soldiers, they were the remnants of Ashborn's army, a formidable force gifted to him as a parting legacy. The sheer number dwarfed his own forces, their presence a testament to Ashborn's immense power. A wave of emotions washed over Kenzo. Awe, trepidation, and a flicker of excitement coursed through him. He understood the implications. Ashborn's legacy lived on within these soldiers, and their arrival hinted at a connection, a thread that led to the enigmatic being who had chosen him. If you are here, Kenzo began, his voice barely a whisper, then that means. He trailed off, his gaze fixed on the vast army before him, his mind grappling with the possibilities. He is near, he concluded, the weight of the revelation settling upon him. as Kenzo grappled with the weight of Ashborn's legacy. A scene unfolded elsewhere, a stark contrast to the tension that gripped him. A figure, silhouetted against the fiery backdrop of a setting sun, soared through the vast expanse of space. Crimson hair, like a comet's tail, streamed behind him, catching the dying light. In his wake, a magnificent spectacle unfolded, an army of colossal dragons, their wings casting long shadows across the celestial canvas. An enigmatic smile played on the figure's lips, betraying a thrilling anticipation. News of the Shadow Monarch's return had ignited a spark within him, a yearning for the long-awaited confrontation. He, who had once defied the enigmatic being's reign, now craved the opportunity to prove his own power, to settle an ancient score. The earth, a vibrant blue marble suspended in the cosmic void, grew closer with each passing moment. The figure's smile widened, his eyes burning with a fierce determination. The clash between two titans, fueled by past grievances and a thirst for dominance, was about to erupt, sending tremors across the very fabric of existence. The stage was set, the players poised, and the battle for supremacy was about to begin. The air hung heavy with relief as Megumi successfully transferred his cursed point to his sister, Tsumiki. He finally saw the color return to her cheeks, a stark contrast to the pale, lifeless visage she had previously displayed. A gentle smile graced her lips as she blinked her eyes open, the warmth rekindled in her gaze. Yuji couldn't help but grin. Everything seemed to be falling into place. With Tsumiki safe and Kenzo likely subduing Gojo at this very moment, the tide seemed to be turning in their favor. All they had to do was lay low and wait for the dust to settle. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Tsumiki, her voice laced with unexpected authority, spoke up, her words shattering the fragile sense of security. Add a new rule, she declared. Please allow free entry and exits between colonies. Megumi and Yuji froze, their smiles fading as quickly as they appeared. This wasn't part of the plan. A flicker of unease sparked in their eyes, a silent question hanging in the air. Their apprehension was readily confirmed. Rule accepted. A voice resonated through the air, devoid of any warmth or humanity. After all, a player is allowed to choose their battlefield. Megumi's blood ran cold as he turned towards the source of the voice. His eyes widened in sheer horror as his gaze landed on Tsumiki's now vacant and emotionless expression. A sadistic smile stretched across her face, a stark contrast to the gentle warmth that had previously resided there. Who are you?" he stammered, his voice raspy with a mixture of fear and disbelief. The figure tilted its head, the smile widening further. "Just playing with you, little brother," it chirped, its voice devoid of any semblance of Tsumiki's youthful innocence. "I am Urazu," it declared, the name echoing ominously in the silence. Megumi's world felt like it was crumbling around him. This wasn't Tsumiki. This was something else entirely. Something ancient, powerful, and utterly terrifying. He clenched his fists, the anger burning in his eyes barely contained. "What did you do to my sister?" he roared, his voice laced with a desperate rage. Urazu chuckled, a chilling sound that reverberated through the room. "Took it over," it replied nonchalantly, its eyes gleaming with an unsettling amusement. "Weren't you always the smart one, Megumi? You'd figure it out eventually." Megumi felt his body tremble with a mix of fury and despair. He had just saved his sister from one threat, only to find her replaced by another far more monstrous. The weight of this revelation hung heavy in the air, casting a long shadow over their already precarious situation. As Urazu sprouted wings and took flight, Megumi's rage burned brighter than the setting sun. He wouldn't let this entity take his sister, not without a fight. With a desperate cry, he launched himself into the air, determination etched on his young face. Meanwhile, Yuji felt a chilling sensation, a phantom whisper against his ear. Before he could react, a disembodied mouth materialized beside him, its chilling words resonating in the air, in chain. In an instant, Sukuna seized control of Yuji's body. A twisted grin spread across the vessel's face as he addressed Megumi. "I made a binding vow with the brat," he declared, his voice dripping with malice. "For 1 minute, I cannot harm anyone. But that doesn't mean I can't play a little gamble." With a swift motion, Sukuna ripped off one of his cursed fingers, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. He expected a surge of power, a transformation triggered by the forbidden fruit. Yet, nothing happened. A wave of manic laughter erupted from him. "Seems the boy forgot to include himself in the binding vow," he cackled, a hint of respect grudgingly acknowledging Yuji's cunning. But his amusement was short-lived. A torrent of water, summoned by Megumi's maximum elephant technique, slammed into him, sending him flying back. Sukuna, however, was far from fazed. He saw an opportunity and seized it with a predator's agility. He blitzed towards Megumi, the cursed finger disappearing into the boy's throat in a flash. The markings characteristic of Sukuna's presence began to spread across Megumi's body. However, before the transformation could complete, a deep, guttural voice echoed from within Megumi. "Seems like his soul can still resist me for a bit," the voice rumbled, a voice filled with a chilling familiarity that sent shivers down Yuji's spine. The horrifying truth dawned on him with agonizing clarity. This wasn't Megumi anymore. This was Sukuna inhabiting his friend's body, a terrifying amalgamation of power and malevolence. With a gasp, Yuji grasped the gravity of the situation. His best friend, his comrade, was now a puppet in the hands of the King of Curses. Yuji's fury erupted like a geyser. The sight of his friend, his comrade, twisted into a vessel for the King of Curses, ignited a primal rage within him. Gone were the strategic calculations, the careful dismantling tactics. All that remained was a raw, unadulterated desire to protect what was precious, to tear down the entity that had dared to defile his friend. He lunged at Sukuna, a whirlwind of rage and despair fueling his movements. Gone were the intricate sequences, the precise maneuvers honed through countless battles. Every punch, every kick, was a primal scream of defiance, a desperate attempt to exorcise the evil that had taken root in Megumi's body. Sukuna, ever the sadist, reveled in the raw emotion coursing through Yuji. He dodged and parried with an almost playful ease, enjoying the spectacle of the boy's blind fury. He toyed with him, like a cat batting at a cornered mouse, relishing the boy's struggle. Sukuna, unwilling to spend time on this waste of oxygen, decided to just use dismantle to get rid of Yuki. Blood splattered everywhere as countless dismantle hit Yuji, but he didn't care at all. But Yuji, fueled by his rage, refused to yield. He ignored the throbbing pain in his muscles, the growing exhaustion gnawing at his limbs. He pushed himself beyond his limits, each blow a desperate plea for his friend trapped within. A primal roar ripped from Yuji's throat, raw and unfiltered. His eyes, blazing with a storm of fury, locked onto Sukuna. Gone was the strategic fighter, replaced by a berserker fueled by the violation of his friend. Ignoring the searing pain in his own body, Yuji launched himself at Sukuna, a whirlwind of rage and desperation. He abandoned the intricate techniques, the calculated dismantles, favoring instead a barrage of brutal blows. Each punch and kick was a desperate plea, a primal scream aimed at the entity that dared possess his friend. Sukuna, however, remained unfazed. He danced through Yuji's assault with an almost playful ease, his mocking laughter grating on the already frayed nerves of his opponent. He saw the raw emotion, the uncontrolled fury, and with a twisted amusement, decided to play with his food. But just as Sukuna prepared to deliver a punishing counter, a flicker of something unexpected crossed his face. In a heartbeat, Yuji vanished from his sight, reappearing a split second later with a resounding black flash against Sukuna's chest, and then another one to his face. This wasn't the clumsy, uncontrolled burst of cursed energy Sukuna had witnessed before. This was precise, deadly, a testament to the countless hours Yuji had poured into mastering the technique. 2 more black flashes followed in quick succession, leaving dark scorch marks on Sukuna's face and torso. A flicker of surprise, quickly masked by irritation, passed through Sukuna's eyes. Even in his rage, the brat can still land black flashes, he muttered, his voice laced with a grudging respect he refused to acknowledge. TCH, I've seen better control from a non-sorcerer. Despite the backhanded compliment, the seed of doubt had been planted. Sukuna, the king of curses, the being who reveled in toying with his opponents, now found himself facing an adversary who, fueled by rage and fueled by love, refused to be broken. A primal roar clawed its way out of Yuji's throat, echoing across the ravaged training grounds. His rage, a searing inferno, remained, but underneath it, a spark of control flickered, fueled by the memory of Kenzo's guidance. He remembered the lesson: if you feel the rage consuming you, imagine the damage you can inflict with control. 3 punches with decent curse energy, or black flashes. Yuji gritted his teeth, recalling the searing impact of the technique and the immense satisfaction of unleashing it with precision. His emotions became his fuel, not his master. He channeled his rage into a focused flow of cursed energy, circulating it throughout his body with a newfound intensity. Sukuna, still basking in the amusement of Yuji's earlier outburst, watched with a hint of surprise as his opponent's movements shifted. The wild abandon was replaced by a controlled aggression, a predator stalking its prey with a deadly focus. Before Sukuna could react fully, Yuji vanished from his sight, reappearing a split second later with a thunderous black flash impacting the King of Curses' right arm. The impact sent a shockwave through the air, ripping through Sukuna's clothes and leaving a charred crater on his arm. Sukuna's amusement vanished, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. He glared at Yuji, his eyes narrowed. But before he could retaliate, a blinding flash erupted once more. Another perfectly executed black flash slammed into Sukuna's chest, the sound of his ribs cracking echoing in the clearing. Yuji didn't relent. He danced around Sukuna, his movements fluid and precise. With a final surge of focused aggression, he unleashed a third black flash, striking Sukuna across the face. The force of the blow sent the King of Curses reeling backward, a growl escaping his lips. Yuji, driven by an unwavering resolve and remembering Kenzo's guidance, unleashed another black flash, a testament to the man chosen by the sparks of black. The thunderous impact echoed through the training grounds, momentarily stunning even Sukuna. But the King of Curses was far from defeated. As Yuji prepared another strike, fueled by a righteous fury that burned brighter than his own blood loss, Sukuna's reflexes proved too fast. He darted to the side, narrowly avoiding Yuji's devastating blow. In a flash, Sukuna seized the opportunity. With a chilling smirk, he slammed his hands into Yuji's stomach, unleashing the curse technique, Cleave. A sickening sound ripped through the air as Yuji was sent flying back, a gaping hole torn into his uniform, revealing a network of deep, jagged cuts. Despite the searing pain that threatened to engulf him, Yuji refused to yield. His eyes, blazing with an unwavering determination, locked onto Sukuna. The image of a malevolent entity defiling his friend fueled his resolve. This was not just a fight for survival, it was a battle for the very soul of Megumi, and potentially the world. Gasping for breath, Yuji stumbled to his feet, a crimson stain blooming on his uniform. His body screamed in protest, but his spirit remained unbroken. A fierce growl escaped his lips, a sound that spoke volumes of his unwavering defiance. He may have been battered and bruised, but the spark of hope, the flicker of defiance, refused to be extinguished. The air crackled with an oppressive tension as Sukuna watched his opponent, a begrudging respect flickering in his eyes. This wasn't the naive boy he had faced earlier. This was a warrior forged in the fires of adversity, a testament to the indomitable human spirit. Yuji coughed, a ragged breath escaping his bloodied lips. Still alive, huh? Sukuna remarked, his tone laced with a hint of surprise, or perhaps begrudging respect. No, it was disdain. Yuji mustered a glare, his voice hoarse with exertion and laced with a burning hatred. Why do you take such joy in trampling on the weak? Sukuna scoffed, his amusement morphing into a twisted kind of disdain. The real question is, why are you so weak? Why do you cling to life like bugs? How can a creature so easily crushed even dream of happiness? Your suffering is natural, the way of the world. Your kind exists to be trampled upon. His words hung heavy in the air, dripping with a chilling cynicism that painted humans as nothing more than insects to be squashed. It was a brutal and nihilistic worldview, one that challenged the very core of Yuji's beliefs. But Yuji wouldn't be swayed. He stood tall, his form battered but his spirit unwavering. A sudden shift disrupted the tense standoff. A figure materialized from the shadows, cloaked in the fading light of dusk. It was Maki Zenin, her obsidian eyes radiating a fierce determination. Sukuna, momentarily caught off guard by her lack of cursed energy, turned towards the newcomer, a flicker of amusement dancing in his crimson eyes. Zenin-senpai, Yuji gasped, a surge of relief momentarily washing over him. He was battered and bruised, but the sight of his ally injected a renewed sense of hope into his weary spirit. Maki, her gaze unwavering, approached Sukuna. Sorry I'm late, she addressed Yuji, her voice devoid of emotion but laced with a subtle undercurrent of concern. Yuji managed a weak nod, his voice raspy from exertion. Kill him, he croaked, his words carrying the weight of his desperation and unwavering resolve. He won't die. Sukuna's smile widened, revealing a chilling display of sharp canines. This unexpected development had piqued his interest. This will be fun, he declared, his voice dripping with a twisted pleasure at the prospect of another challenge. The air crackled with a renewed surge of tension. The dynamic had shifted. Now, it was a 2-on-1, a desperate gamble against an entity of immense power. But within the battered body of Yuji and the stoic exterior of Maki burned a fire that refused to be extinguished. A surge of energy, fueled by the desperation of the situation and the unexpected arrival of Maki, coursed through Yuji's battered body. He may have been physically spent, but his spirit remained unbroken. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between him and Maki, their shared training and unwavering determination forging a wordless bond. As one, they launched themselves at Sukuna, a whirlwind of coordinated attacks. Yuji, fueled by his recent black flashes, unleashed a barrage of precise punches, aiming not for overwhelming force, but for pinpoint accuracy. Maki, utilizing her enhanced reflexes and her cursed tool, the playful cloud, moved like a phantom, flanking Sukuna and striking with lightning-fast precision. Sukuna, initially caught off guard by the unexpected assault, quickly regained his composure. However, as he raised his hand to counter Yuji's attack, a flicker of pain shot through him. He felt a resistance, a tightening within his own body, hindering his full power. It was Megumi, his soul fighting back from within the depths of Sukuna's cursed being. Frustration contorted Sukuna's face. He attempted to unleash a powerful curse technique, but the resistance intensified, crippling his movements and forcing him to redirect his attack partially. Yuji, capitalizing on this momentary lapse, landed a solid blow to Sukuna's chest, sending him staggering back. Maki, seizing the opportunity, followed up with a series of blindingly fast blunt hits with her playful cloud, each one leaving shallow bruise on Sukuna's body. The King of Curses, accustomed to overwhelming his opponents with sheer power, found himself frustrated and increasingly cornered by the coordinated attacks of his weakened opponents. The realization dawned on him. With each attack he attempted, Megumi's resistance grew stronger, sapping his power and hindering his ability to fight at full capacity. This unexpected development cast a shadow of doubt on his earlier confidence. Yuji's fist connected with a satisfying thud against Sukuna's chest, sending a ripple of pain through the King of Curses. Despite the obvious blow, Sukuna merely scoffed, his annoyance growing by the second. "You truly are very dull," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. Maki, seizing the opportunity created by Yuji, materialized behind Sukuna with lightning speed. Her fist, imbued with cursed energy, arced towards the back of his head. However, Sukuna was faster. He twisted with inhuman agility, deflecting Maki's attack with the back of his hand. The force of the blow sent a shockwave through her arm, momentarily numbing her fingers. Undeterred, Maki pressed the offensive, lashing out with another swift kick aimed at Sukuna's knee. He blocked again, this time with an open palm, the sound of bones meeting echoing through the air. Despite the impact, Maki remained undaunted, a resolute glint in her eyes. She took the blow head-on, a spray of crimson mist escaping her lips as blood trickled down her chin. Sukuna, ever the sadist, couldn't help but acknowledge her tenacity. "Not bad," he grudgingly admitted, a flicker of twisted respect momentarily replacing his annoyance. "For a human, that is." The brief exchange was a microcosm of the battle itself. Yuji and Maki, fueled by determination and fueled by love for their friend, fought like cornered animals, their movements synchronized despite the lack of spoken words. Sukuna, recognizing Maki's relentless pursuit, employed a cunning tactic. He shifted his focus to Yuji for a split second, feigning an attack. This subtle shift was an expertly crafted bait, designed to lure Maki in and exploit a potential opening. As expected, Maki, ever the perceptive fighter, recognized the fabricated vulnerability and seized the opportunity. She darted towards Sukuna, her movements swift and decisive, aiming to capitalize on his momentary lapse. However, Sukuna, anticipating her reaction, unleashed a weakened dismantle technique. Despite the limitations imposed by Megumi's resistance, a dismantle, even weakened, remained a devastating attack at close range. The technique, fueled by cursed energy, carried immense destructive potential, capable of inflicting catastrophic damage. Just as the dismantle hurtled towards Maki's head, barely inches away from delivering a potentially fatal blow, a shadowy tendril erupted from her own shadow. This unexpected intervention acted as a shield, intercepting the dismantle with a resounding clang. The cursed energy dissipated harmlessly, leaving behind a faint scorch mark on the ethereal barrier. Sukuna, momentarily stunned by this unforeseen development, watched as the shadowy hand retreated back into Maki's shadow. A wide grin stretched across his face, devoid of humor but revealing a twisted sense of amusement. "I thought as much," he chuckled, his voice laced with a chilling satisfaction. A figure, clad in shadowy armor and wielding spectral weaponry, materialized from Maki's shadow with a silent growl. Its fiery eyes, burning with an unknown purpose, fixated upon the King of Curses. In a blur of motion, it launched itself at Sukuna, unleashing a relentless barrage of attacks. The King of Curses, despite his weakened state, roared in defiance and met the onslaught head-on. The clash was a whirlwind of shadows and cursed energy. While the figure dealt significant damage, Sukuna's immense power, fueled by his regenerative abilities, allowed him to hold his own. Suddenly, a chilling voice, devoid of any warmth, sliced through the chaos. "Maximum output." Dead calm, the air shimmered, and a thick layer of ice materialized around Yuji and Maki, encasing them in a frozen tomb. The Shadow Warrior, recognizing the threat and its primary directive, abandoned its offensive against Sukuna. It shifted its focus towards the ice prison, its form flickering with a flicker of urgency. Teleporting with inhuman speed, it appeared before Maki, its spectral hand outstretched towards the icy barrier. Sukuna, panting slightly, emerged from the rubble, his body marred by numerous cuts and bruises, yet visibly healing at an accelerated rate. He observed the scene with a hint of begrudging respect tinged with curiosity. So, its main purpose is to protect the girl with no cursed energy. He mused aloud. He must have won under that brat's shadow too. But why isn't it coming out? Has it not realized yet that the brat's body has been taken over, or does it only come out when the brat's life is in danger? A series of sharp cracks echoed from Sukuna's neck as he rolled his shoulders, a grimace contorting his face. He clenched his fists, the resistance from Megumi's soul within him a constant prickling annoyance. He yearned to unleash his full power, to crush his opponents like ants, but the lingering presence held him back, reminding him of the price he paid for possessing Megumi's body. His crimson gaze fell upon Yuram, who stood with head bowed in a show of subservience. "Is the bath ready?" His voice boomed, demanding rather than asking. Yuram, her voice a mere whisper compared to his, offered a curt nod. "Yes, Lord Sukuna," she replied, not daring to meet his eyes. A flicker of impatience crossed Sukuna's face. "Then let's go," he muttered, his voice laced with a hint of frustration. He made a series of hand gestures, forming a complex seal, and a monstrous entity materialized before them. The summoned beast, towered over them, its grotesque form casting a menacing shadow that stretched across the devastated ground. Compared to the smaller new Megumi typically summoned, this one was a behemoth, a testament to the vast difference in cursed energy between the two vessels. Sukuna and Yuram, silhouetted against the setting sun, mounted news back. With a powerful surge of cursed energy, the monstrous creature propelled itself into the sky, soaring away like a dark, winged nightmare. As the final shards of ice crumbled, Yuji and Maki, freed by the Shadow Soldier's unwavering protection, emerged into the harsh reality of their precarious situation. The soldier, its purpose fulfilled, dissolved back into Maki's shadow, a silent guardian forever etched in their memories. The scene shifted, revealing Kenzo and Gojo, their conversation taking an unexpected turn. Kenzo, his brow furrowed in concern, sensed a shift in the connection between the shadow soldier guarding Megumi and the boy's soul. It felt as if Megumi was being pulled deeper into the abyss, his existence fading into an unsettling void. Gojo, ever perceptive, picked up on Kenzo's sudden change in demeanor. "So, you going to tell me who it is, or are you going to try and blatantly lie to my face again?" he challenged, his playful facade masking a serious undercurrent. Kenzo, momentarily caught off guard, met Gojo's playful yet sharp stare. "When was the last time I did that?" he countered, trying to deflect the question. Gojo's reply, laced with theatrical sarcasm, cut through Kenzo's deflection. "My ability is gravity, you know," he said, his voice dripping with mock sincerity, pulling out a mana potion out of nowhere. "I remember it just like yesterday," he added, wiping a non-existent tear from his eye for emphasis. "We don't talk about that," Kenzo muttered, clearing his throat to regain his composure. He knew Gojo wouldn't let the matter drop easily. "You know how, as the Shadow Monarch, my whole thing is like preserving." Gojo, surprisingly, didn't interrupt this time. Instead, he listened intently, a hint of understanding settling in his eyes. Finally, after a moment of dramatic pause, Gojo spoke, his voice devoid of its usual playful demeanor. "Someone with the ability of destruction is coming to Earth to raise hell, huh?" Kenzo looked at him, momentarily stunned. "How did you know?" he blurted out, surprised that Gojo had grasped the gravity of the situation so quickly. Gojo shrugged nonchalantly. "It's not hard to put two and two together, really," he replied, a hint of a smirk playing on his lips. The revelation struck them both like a physical blow. Kenzo, his face etched with concern, voiced the horrifying possibility: Megumi's soul trapped inside his own body. Chances are, Sukuna switched vessels. The air crackled with unspoken tension as Kenzo's words hung heavy in the air. Gojo, ever the enigmatic figure, remained stoic for a fleeting moment before a flicker of something darker, something akin to rage, passed through his azure eyes. "Can you get me there?" Gojo's voice, devoid of its usual playful undertone, was laced with a raw urgency. He yearned to reach Megumi, to understand the situation firsthand. Kenzo, however, shook his head solemnly. "No, I can't reach the Shadow Soldier unless I am near him. It seems as if he was pushed deep into their shadow, out of my range." Kenzo fell silent, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. After a moment, he spoke again, his voice a low murmur. "Guess I won't have to hold back then." Gojo, ever perceptive, picked up on the underlying meaning. He turned to Kenzo, a single raised eyebrow his only query. Sensing Gojo's silent question, Kenzo sighed and began to explain. "It's a long story," he started, his voice heavy with guilt. "When Yuji was brought to me, mortally wounded, I made a binding vow." A flicker of surprise crossed Gojo's face. Binding vows were powerful and dangerous, their consequences severe if broken. He knew enough to suspect this wouldn't be a simple tale of grief. "I hated myself for letting him die," Kenzo continued, his voice cracking with emotion. The guilt was overwhelming, and in a moment of desperation, I made a promise to never lay a hand on him, to never directly harm Yuji. He paused, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and resolve. But now, his voice trailed off, the unspoken implication hanging heavy in the air. Gojo understood. With Sukuna in control of Megumi's body, the binding vow no longer applied. Kenzo, freed from his self-imposed restraint, could now fight at his full potential. Gojo, ever curious, pressed further. "What did you get in return for that vow?" he inquired, his gaze fixed on Kenzo. Kenzo fell silent, lost in thought. The cost of the binding vow was something he hadn't truly considered until now. After a moment of contemplation, he spoke, his voice tinged with introspection. "The ability to see the contour of the soul," he revealed, a thoughtful expression settling on his face. "I suppose, at the time, I didn't even realize it. Being a Shadow Monarch already granted me access to a similar sense, so it probably went unnoticed." Gojo absorbed this information, his mind working rapidly. While the consequences of the vow were undoubtedly significant, the unexpected benefit added another layer of complexity to Kenzo's character. However, personal reflections would have to wait. The immediate concern was the liberation of Megumi, and the removal of Sukuna from his body. Mahito would be the easy answer, Kenzo muttered, voicing the obvious solution while simultaneously dismissing it. But Sukuna's not stupid. He'd anticipate that. Eliminating Mahito as a straightforward solution forced Kenzo to consider alternative strategies. Utilizing another untested shadow soldier held unnecessary risks, especially considering Sukuna's potential access to Megumi's powerful Shikigami, Mahoraga. Mahoraga, Kenzo murmured, the name rolling off his tongue with a hint of apprehension. The only Shikigami Megumi hadn't tamed yet. Its ability to adapt to any phenomenon makes it a formidable opponent. He elaborated, his voice laced with a note of caution. However, unlike Gojo, who was limited to a set number of techniques, Kenzo possessed a wider range of abilities. This diversity offered a potential advantage, potentially overwhelming Mahoraga's ability to adapt in time. The other Shikigami pose less of a threat. He concluded, his mind formulating a plan. Mahoraga is the key obstacle. If we can incapacitate it, the rest might fall. The air crackled with anticipation within the dimly lit room. Yuji, Nobara, and Panda, along with various other Jujutsu sorcerers, anxiously awaited a strategy meeting. However, their most crucial advisor, Kenzo, the Shadow Monarch, was conspicuously absent. A swirling portal of inkai darkness pulsated in the room's center. An unsettling energy emanated from it, whispering of an unseen world beyond. This portal, a gateway to Kenzo's domain. The gate was the only clue to his whereabouts. Curiosity piqued, one could step through the portal and find themselves transported to a vast, otherworldly expanse. Rows upon rows of shadowy figures patrolled this gate, an army of loyal soldiers under Kenzo's command. Here, amidst the swirling shadows, stood Kenzo himself, a silent observer. His watchful gaze lingered on the ongoing training exercises, his hand instinctively resting within his pocket. A fierce battle raged between Igris and Bullion, two elite shadow soldiers. Their movements were a blur of dark energy, each blow resonating with a resounding thwack. However, it was quickly becoming apparent that Bullion held the upper hand, his attacks outmatching Igris' defense. Kenzo shifted his focus, observing the playful sparring session between Kashimo and Ishigori. Their movements, though intense, were imbued with a sense of twisted camaraderie, their laughter echoing through the gate. His attention then shifted to an isolated corner where a lone shadow soldier, a recent addition to his ranks, stood before a captured cursed spirit, the one provided by Kenjaku. Kenzo's eyes narrowed as he assessed the soldier, his mind racing with possibilities. Kenjaku, the knowledge gleaned from the rogue sorcerer, had proven invaluable. Kenzo was using it to refine his techniques, to further enhance his own power. He wasn't preparing solely for Sukuna, that foe was merely a fly to be swatted away. No, his ultimate goal was a far more formidable opponent, his very antithesis. Divided by. The knowledge gleaned from Kenjaku was proving to be a goldmine. As Kenzo surveyed the training grounds within the gate, a satisfied smirk played on his lips. So that's how a barrierless domain works, huh? He mused, the implications of this forbidden technique sinking in. This knowledge would be instrumental in his future endeavors. With a curt nod of dismissal, Kenjaku vanished once more, tasked with seeking out and recruiting additional shadow soldiers. Kenzo, his gaze sweeping across his assembled forces, began strategically assigning training partners. Hakari, the boisterous gambler, would be paired with the berserker yet powerful Kashimo. Their similar styles would create a dynamic training environment. pushing each other to new heights. Yuta, brimming with raw potential, would benefit from Yuro's experience and tactical expertise. Ishigori would also be a good push, the more the merrier really. Maki, the unwavering warrior, would be honed by the combined skills of Igris and Malgrim. Their relentless assault would force her to refine her defensive techniques and exploit any openings with lethal precision. Yuji, the ever-determined boy, would get Choso. Their very different fighting style will help Yuji with his problem of not having a good time with people that use ranges instead of throwing hands. For curse technique refinement, there was no better choice than Kenjaku. His vast knowledge and understanding of cursed energy would be invaluable in helping Yuji unlock his full potential, or anyone who needs it. The beauty of Kenzo's domain lay in its versatility. By creating individual pocket dimensions, each pair could train in a customized environment, free from distractions. This maximized efficiency and allowed for tailored training regimens. Meanwhile, Kenzo himself wouldn't be idle. He planned to engage in a separate training session with Gojo, a clash of titans that would undoubtedly push mostly Gojo to his physical limit. A shadow of concern flickered across Kenzo's face as he surveyed his remaining team members. He readily acknowledged the limitations of Panda and Inumaki. While their curse techniques were unique and valuable, they wouldn't be effective against a foe as powerful as Sukuna in his current state. Enhancing their reinforcement and curse energy knowledge is the best I can do for them for now, he muttered, his voice laced with a hint of frustration. He knew they yearned to contribute, but their safety was paramount. They would play a crucial role in future battles, but against Sukuna, the risk was simply too great. His gaze then shifted towards Nobara, a young woman with a fierce spirit and a powerful technique. Her straw doll technique, particularly the resonance ability, held immense potential. However, the very essence of that technique, requiring a piece of her target, made it a risk he wasn't willing to take. Even with reaching grade 1, he mused, against Sukuna, it's like sending a lamb to the slaughter. The battlefield was no place for her fiery spirit at this moment. Training her to refine her technique further, to unlock its true potential, was a safer and more strategic option. A wave of grim realization washed over him. The battle lines were clear. Yuji, Yuta, Maki, Hikari, and Gojo, these were the only ones who stood a chance. And even then, only when an opportunity presented itself. Sukuna's power, amplified by Megumi's body, was a force to be reckoned with. Miles away, within a decaying temple bathed in an eerie green glow, a scene unfolded that sent shivers down one's spine. The king of curses, Ryomen Sukuna, stood tall, a cruel smile twisting his lips. He held aloft his final finger, the last missing piece of his full power. With a sickening crunch, he devoured it, the cursed energy coursing through him like a dark tide. Yuram, ever the dutiful attendant, bowed deeply. I apologize, Lord Sukuna. Despite my best efforts, I could not locate the final finger. Her voice trembled, hinting at the fear that gnawed at her. I am at your mercy. I will accept any punishment you deem fit for my failure. Sukuna, however, seemed unfazed by her apology. His gaze, cold and calculating, fell upon her. Rest easy, he rumbled, his voice dripping with amusement. I'm well aware Satoru Gojo was behind its disappearance. No doubt a desperate attempt to save his precious container's life. Yuram simply uttered an "oh," her apprehension barely concealed. But before she could elaborate, Sukuna moved with unnerving swiftness. He strode towards a desiccated figure, a mere husk wrapped in tattered bandages, resembling a forgotten mummy. With a single, brutal motion, Sukuna ripped the head from the mummy's body. The desiccated face, contorted in a silent scream, held no resemblance to the power Sukuna wielded, yet a dark glint flickered in his crimson eyes. This will suffice, he declared, a hint of dark glee in his voice. The substitution, whatever unholy power it possessed, was enough. Here, within the decaying temple, the stage was set for a confrontation that could reshape the very fabric of reality. The king of curses, now at full power, prepared to unleash his wrath. As Sukuna finished devouring the mummy, a shadowy figure emerged from his shadow, a shadow soldier. The soldier spoke in a raspy voice. In 3 days, Megumi, my lord, will be expecting you in Shinjuku. Without waiting for a response, the soldier vanished back into Sukuna's shadow. A wide grin stretched across Sukuna's face. But it wasn't just the news that pleased him. It was the way the shadow soldier had addressed him, Megumi. So, Sukuna thought, a dark glint in his eyes, it still believe I'm Megumi. This will be interesting. The revelation that this followers still believed him to be Megumi seemed to intrigue Sukuna more than the news itself. The bustling cityscape of Shinjuku stretched out beneath them, a stark contrast to the ominous tension that crackled between the figures atop the building. Sukuna, the king of curses, stood tall, a cruel smile twisting his lips. Opposite him, Kenzo, the shadow monarch, and Gojo Satoru, the blindfolded sorcerer, radiated an aura of unwavering resolve. "Alright, let's end this and get it over with," Kenzo declared, cracking his knuckles with a nonchalant air. His words, though seemingly casual, carried the weight of a warrior eager to test his limits. Sukuna's amusement was evident. "Arrogance precedes a fall," he scoffed. "You two are like fish on a chopping board, just waiting to be diced." "Big talk," Kenzo countered, a smirk playing on his lips. "But your current record against me stands at 0-3. Maybe rethink your metaphor." "Defeat is temporary," Sukuna retorted, his voice laced with a chilling conviction. "As long as I draw breath, I am not vanquished." He raised a hand, his crimson eyes gleaming with malice. "Prepare yourselves for the wrath of the King of Curses." The air crackled with cursed energy as the three figures launched themselves into a whirlwind of motion. Gojo, a blur of white and black, unleashed his immense power, his infinity technique distorting the very fabric of space around him. Kenzo, a storm of shadows, his movements unpredictable and deadly, materialized behind Sukuna in a blink, a dark fist aimed for the King of Curses' back. Sukuna, ever the formidable opponent, twisted with inhuman agility, narrowly avoiding Kenzo's blow. He retaliated with a devastating kick, imbued with cursed energy, aimed at Gojo's masked face. Divided by. The battle raged on, a whirlwind of blinding speed and earth-shattering power. Gojo, a whirlwind of white and black, danced around Sukuna, his infinity technique warping the very fabric of space around them. Kenzo, a master strategist, fought not just with his own strength, but with the cunning of a seasoned general. He weaved in and out of the shadows, a phantom tormenting Sukuna. One moment he'd be flanking the King of Curses, unleashing a flurry of dark energy-infused blows. The next he'd vanish, leaving Sukuna to face Gojo's onslaught. Suddenly, a booming voice echoed from the shadows. A hulking figure, Ishigori, materialized behind Sukuna, his massive hand crackling with potent earth energy. "Granite blast," Ishigori roared, launching a devastating sea blast towards Sukuna's back. The very air crackled with the raw power of the attack. Kenzo, his eyes narrowed, saw the perfect opportunity. He willed another shadow soldier, Kashimo, to appear near Sukuna's side. With lightning-fast reflexes, Kashimo lunged, his hand crackling with raw electrical energy aimed for Sukuna's chest. The plan was simple. Ishigori's C would be infused with some of Kashimo's CT, which would allow Kashimo's to strike to activate his curse technique, potentially inflicting a critical blow, without the whole landing a set amount of punches thing. But Sukuna, the King of Curses, wasn't one to be underestimated. Just as Kashimo's hand was about to connect, a chilling sensation ran down Kenzo's spine. He felt a shift in Sukuna's cursed energy, a subtle yet potent fluctuation. In a blink of an eye, a dark aura erupted from Sukuna, engulfing Kashimo's fist. The crackling electricity sputtered and died, neutralized by Sukuna's own cursed energy. Kashimo, his attack negated, stumbled back in shock and excitement. A guttural laugh escaped Sukuna's lips. "Foolish child," he mocked, his eyes glowing with a cruel amusement. "Did you truly believe a simple lightning strike could harm me, the King of Curses?" Kenzo, however, remained unfazed. A sly grin tugged at his lips as he uttered, "Did you forget?" Before the scene shifted in an instant. With a dazzling display of tactical brilliance, Kenzo orchestrated a breathtaking maneuver. Gojo and Kashimo, seemingly defying physics, switched positions in a blink. Gojo, a blur of white and black, materialized in front of Sukuna, his infinity technique distorting the space around them. In one swift motion, he unleashed a devastating punch, a concentrated blast of cursed energy aimed directly at Sukuna's chest. Caught off guard by the sudden shift and the sheer power of the blow, Sukuna was launched flying. He slammed into a nearby building with a bone-crushing impact, the concrete structure disintegrating in a cloud of dust and debris. "Ugh, not another one," Kenzo muttered, wincing as he surveyed the destruction. "I ain't paying for that." Gojo, ever nonchalant, shrugged. "We can just blame it on Sukuna," he offered, a playful glint in his blindfolded eyes. "Yeah, right," Kenzo scoffed. "As if that maniac has the money to pay for any collateral damage." "Hey, you chose the battlefield," Gojo reminded him, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Bullshit," Kenzo replied. Before their playful banter could escalate further, a metallic whiz sliced through the air. Kenzo instinctively tilted his head to the right, narrowly avoiding a flying dismantled object that whizzed past him. It was a piece of debris, propelled outwards from the demolished building by the force of Sukuna's impact. The momentary distraction proved fleeting. Both Kenzo and Gojo sharpened their focus, their eyes trained on the dust cloud settling where Sukuna had landed. They knew their fight was far from over. The King of Curses was a tenacious foe, and his unexpected ability to nullify positive cursed energy had thrown a wrench in their initial strategy. A chilling click echoed through the air, a sound so subtle that only Kenzo, the Shadow Monarch, seemed to register it. His eyes, attuned to the movements of shadows, darted towards Sukuna's feet. Unlike Gojo, whose focus remained on the King of Curses himself, Kenzo's gaze pierced deeper, penetrating the Inkai darkness beneath Sukuna. In that fleeting glimpse, he saw it, the unmistakable form of Mahoraga's wheel spinning ominously within Sukuna's shadow. A flicker of concern crossed Kenzo's face. Mahoraga, the divine spear, held the power to obliterate any cursed object it touched. And there, hovering above Megumi's trapped soul, it spun, a constant threat. "We need to wrap this up," he declared to Gojo, his voice laced with urgency, "before he turns you into a fraction." Gojo scoffed. "Fraction? Me? Do I look like some mathematical equation to you?" His tone was brash, laced with his usual arrogance, but a flicker of surprise flickered in his blindfolded eyes. "Well, you will be a fraction if we don't end this quickly," Kenzo countered, a hint of amusement in his voice. "A Kit Kat bar, perhaps. You wouldn't be the honored one anymore, but you'd certainly be known throughout heaven and earth as the divided one." Gojo's playful retort came swift and sharp, a well-aimed punch to Kenzo's shoulder. Despite the lighthearted exchange, both sorcerers were acutely aware of the gravity of the situation. Gojo, his infinity technique distorting space around him, launched back into action. Kenzo, a phantom in the shadows, orchestrated his own strategy. His shadow soldiers, unseen by Sukuna, began to maneuver, flanking the King of Curses and creating openings for Gojo's relentless assault. Divided by. Miles away from the earth-shattering battle, a group of Jujutsu sorcerers watched in stunned silence. The battle they witnessed defied logic. Gojo and Kenzo, facing off against the King of Curses himself, seemed to be treating the fight like a bizarre game. Gojo's playful taunts and Kenzo's cryptic jokes were a stark contrast to the raw power unleashed around them. One particularly observant sorcerer, however, furrowed his brow. He recalled Kenzo's earlier comment about Gojo becoming a fraction, a Kit Kat bar. A sudden flash of understanding illuminated his face. Mahoraga, the divine general. It must be adapting to Gojo's infinity, waiting to exploit an opening and cleave him in two. Back on the battlefield, the fight intensified. Gojo, ever the reckless one, decided to take a gamble. Without a word to Kenzo, he formed the hand sign and uttered the chilling words, "Domain expansion, infinite void." A wave of swirling darkness emanated from Gojo, engulfing the area in his signature domain. Sukuna, however, remained undeterred. With a guttural roar, he countered with his own domain technique, domain expansion, malevolent shrine. The two domains clashed, a swirling vortex of cursed energy. Unlike Gojo's barrier-based domain, Sukuna's domain was a brutal, open field. It mercilessly assaulted the exterior of Gojo's infinite void, a constant reminder of the threat within. However, Gojo, having anticipated this very scenario thanks to Kenzo's warning, held his ground. Months of relentless training against Kenzo's own barrierless domain had prepared him for this moment. The infinite void, though under immense pressure, remained strong, its impenetrable barrier shielding Gojo from Sukuna's direct attacks. And I wonder how they got months' worth of training in 3 days. But Gojo wasn't content with just holding ground. He saw an opportunity, a daring gamble fueled by their recent exchange. With a confident smirk, Gojo bolted towards Kenzo, his fist cocked back for a devastating punch. Kenzo, however, was prepared. He anticipated Gojo's impulsive move, a result of their unorthodox battle style. In that split second, with Gojo's fist mere inches from his face, Kenzo executed a masterful switch. Exploiting his connection to the shadows, he swapped positions with Sukuna in a blink of an eye. The result was a scene straight out of a twisted magic trick. Gojo's powerful punch, intended for Kenzo, landed squarely on Sukuna's face. A sickening crunch echoed through the air as Sukuna's head snapped back, a look of surprise contorting his features. Divided by. The tide began to turn. Gojo and Kenzo, their unorthodox partnership proving surprisingly effective, pressed their attack on a suddenly defensive Sukuna. The King of Curses, his initial confidence shaken by Gojo's unexpected maneuver, found himself struggling to fend off their combined assault. Undeterred, Sukuna resorted to a newfound tactic, domain amplification. With a flick of his wrist, he wove a thin veil of his own domain around him. This technique, though not a full-fledged expansion, allowed him to bypass Gojo's infinity technique for a fleeting moment. He seized this opportunity to unleash a torrent of physical attacks, his raw strength momentarily unimpeded by Gojo's curse technique. Gojo, however, was a master of hand-to-hand combat. He weaved and parried, deflecting most of Sukuna's blows with impressive agility. Kenzo, meanwhile, watched with sharp eyes. He saw the frustration flicker in Sukuna's eyes as his own curse techniques remained dormant, a key limitation of domain amplification. Seizing his chance, Kenzo materialized behind Sukuna with a shadow soldier by his side. The soldier, weapon imbued with cursed energy, launched a surprise attack. Sukuna, caught off guard by the dual assault, was forced to deactivate domain amplification momentarily to defend himself. This lapse in defense was all Gojo needed. He unleashed a devastating punch, his infinity technique warping the very air around it, landing squarely on Sukuna's jaw. The blow sent the King of Curses reeling, temporarily disoriented. The fragile balance between the domains fractured further, cracks appearing in the barrier separating Gojo's infinite void and Sukuna's malevolent shrine. A click echoed through the tense battlefield, a sound so subtle that only Kenzo, the Shadow Monarch, seemed to register it. His eyes widened as he saw the telltale sign within Sukuna's shadow, the Mahoraga wheel spinning ominously once again. It was clear Mahoraga, the divine general, was adapting to Gojo's infinity at an alarming rate. Knowing they couldn't afford to waste another second, Kenzo sprung into action. He bolted towards Sukuna, a blur of dark energy. Just before his fist connected with the King of Curses' gut, a surge of power coursed through Kenzo's hands. He wasn't channeling cursed energy this time, but something far more potent, mana. Mana, the life force that permeated the universe, flowed through Kenzo with practiced ease. In a split second, he manipulated its very essence, shifting its effect from raw power to a more precise application. With a final surge, he infused his punch with a technique known as Thin Ice Breaker. The air itself seemed to crackle with a sharp energy as Kenzo's fist landed on Sukuna. A barely visible fissure materialized in the air, a testament to the devastating power of Eurosky manipulation. It struck Sukuna directly in the gut, sending a jolt of pain through the King of Curses. However, Kenzo's sharp eyes noted a flicker of Sukuna activating domain amplification just before the blow landed. The curse technique, while deactivated for his own curse techniques, offered a limited defense against external attacks. The impact was undoubtedly lessened, a testament to Sukuna's quick thinking. Divided by, Kenzo watched in disbelief as Sukuna's domain flickered and collapsed, followed by Gojo's own domain dissolving. The sheer exertion of their clash had pushed them both to their limits. Gojo was likely suffering from curse energy burnout. Sukuna, though visibly winded, was no better. His cursed energy reserves would be depleted, making it harder to manipulate. Seizing this golden opportunity, Kenzo vanished from sight, a phantom in the shadows. He reappeared behind Sukuna in a blink, a ruthless glint in his eyes. A powerful punch, fueled by the last dregs of his own energy, slammed into the King of Curses' gut. Before Sukuna could react, Kenzo reappeared once more, this time delivering a punishing knee strike followed by a bone-crushing kick. The impact sent Sukuna flying, crashing into the ground and creating a spiderweb of cracks on the already damaged building. "Think that'll knock some sense into you," Kenzo called out, panting slightly. Gojo, leaning against a broken pillar, chuckled weakly. "Looks like you got that out of your system," he remarked, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. Kenzo shot him a withering look. "Aren't you suffering from burnout too?" Gojo shrugged, his usual cocky smirk replaced by a grimace. "Oh, that. Pain in the ass, no doubt. But I can handle it." Kenzo frowned. "Not the time to take risks," he retorted, his voice laced with concern. Their playful banter was cut short as a figure emerged from the debris. Sukuna, battered but unbroken, stood tall, his crimson eyes blazing with a renewed fury. To their surprise, a faint blue glow emanated from his wounds, slowly repairing the damage. Divided by. A satisfied smirk played on Sukuna's lips as he surveyed the battlefield. The combined assault of Gojo and the Shadow Monarch had pushed him to his limits, forcing him to expend a tremendous amount of cursed energy. Yet, despite the throbbing pain and the exhaustion gnawing at his core, Sukuna couldn't help but feel a flicker of amusement. "The brat's holding back," he mused, his crimson eyes fixed on Kenzo, who hovered several feet above the ground. Each blow, Sukuna noticed, had been delivered with a touch of restraint, a subtle pullback at the last moment. It wasn't hard to put two and two together. Kenzo, for all his bluster and aggression, wasn't aiming for a complete and utter defeat. Sukuna scoffed. Of course not. This vessel, this battered body he currently occupied, belonged to Megumi. The Shadow Monarch, it seemed, wasn't willing to risk permanent damage to his precious host. A wave of dark satisfaction washed over Sukuna. This realization, this vulnerability they had inadvertently exposed, was a weakness he could exploit. he would use their hesitation, their misplaced concern for the vessel, to his advantage. Divided by. A chilling whisper echoed through the air. Open. Sukuna, fueled by a twisted sense of amusement at their hesitation, unleashed a hidden weapon. From out of thin air, a flaming arrow materialized, imbued with potent fire-cursed energy. Without a moment's hesitation, he hurled it towards Kenzo. Kenzo, despite his battle awareness, seemed momentarily taken aback. He hadn't anticipated Sukuna possessing a fire-based curse technique. The arrow, a blazing comet, streaked towards him with incredible speed. Just as the arrow reached a hair's breadth from Kenzo's face, the Shadow Monarch reacted with lightning speed. With a blur of movement, he vanished from his spot, teleporting away from the trajectory of the fiery projectile. Gojo, ever vigilant, had already activated his infinity technique, creating an invisible barrier around himself just in case Kenzo's maneuver wasn't fast enough. The arrow slammed into a nearby building with a deafening explosion. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the air, dust and debris flying outwards. The resulting inferno engulfed the building, reducing everything within a 100-meter radius to smoldering rubble. As Kenzo landed away from Sukuna, he felt it. Kenzo's eyes looked up at the sky as he could feel it coming down. "Yao Gojo, think you can handle this on your own?" Kenzo said, looking at his sensei. "Don't worry, I will be fine," Gojo said with a smile as the shadowy blindfold that was on his face vanished, revealing his 6 eyes in all their glory. "Don't lose," Kenzo said, walking away from the battlefield. "No, I'd win," Gojo said confidently. Kenzo walked away from the battlefield into an empty area, and stood there for a few seconds before from the sky a red gate opened and out from the sky. He was here. A wide grin stretched across the figure's face as he stepped out of the crimson portal, his voice booming through the desolate area. "Oh, you were waiting for me, isn't this marvelous?" Kenzo squinted, taking in the imposing figure before him. This was the Dragon Monarch, the embodiment of destruction, and he had finally arrived. Here stood the answer to Kenzo's desperate summons, a gamble he knew could tip the scales in their favor or unleash unimaginable chaos. The Dragon Monarch was a physical manifestation of power. His physique, sculpted with honed muscle, showcased years of battle and dominion. Crimson hair, seemingly ablaze with an inner fire, cascaded down his broad shoulders. A neatly trimmed red beard framed a face etched with both regality and a hint of feral amusement. His eyes, the most captivating feature, glowed with an unsettling crimson light, reflecting the very essence of destruction he commanded. Clad in shimmering silver-red armor, the Dragon Monarch exuded an aura of authority. The high collar of the armor accentuated his imposing stature, while a reddish-brown tailcoat swayed gracefully with each movement. Kenzo couldn't help but sense an undercurrent of untamed power beneath the regal facade. A fearsome army materialized behind the Dragon Monarch, a writhing mass of dragons and monstrous beasts, all poised for battle. From Kenzo's own shadow, a counterforce emerged, his contingent of shadow soldiers. Over the past 3 days, Kenzo had meticulously trained them, ensuring even his weakest soldiers stood toe-to-toe with a special-grade sorcerer. He had even bolstered his ranks with the remaining 2 disaster curses, desperate to bridge the numerical gap. Despite being outnumbered 10-1, Kenzo's forces boasted superior quality. The Dragon Monarch boomed, his voice echoing across the battlefield. "Yield, Shadow Monarch, and join me, or die today." Kenzo's response was a resolute, "Bring it." A demonic grin contorted the Dragon Monarch's face. "That's the spirit." With a flourish, he materialized his battle armor and hefted a draconic sword, its edge gleaming with malevolent power. As he released his mana, a tremor surged through the air, shaking not just Japan, but the entire world. This battle promised to be a fight for the ages. Divided by. The Dragon Monarch, a colossus of destruction incarnate, unleashed his fury. A single, primal roar ripped from his throat, a sound that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality. With a flick of his wrist, a torrent of fire erupted from his draconic blade. It wasn't a mere flame, but a condensed inferno, a white-hot maelstrom that devoured the air itself. The fire spread outwards with horrifying speed, a tide of incandescent oblivion. Buildings crumbled to dust in an instant, their steel frames melting like wax. Trees ignited in a blink, their screams a ghastly symphony swallowed by the roar of the flames. The earth itself seemed to scorch, the ground turning to cracked and smoldering glass. Everything the fire touched ceased to exist. It wasn't mere combustion, it was annihilation. The intense heat vaporized all it encountered, leaving behind only the faintest wisps of ash, a chilling testament to the absolute power of the Dragon Monarch's flames. Kenzo's shadow soldiers, despite their recent enhancements, recoiled from the Inferno's fury. Even the mightiest dragons in the Dragon Monarch's army flinched back, their fiery breath rendered insignificant compared to their master's cataclysmic display. The battlefield transformed into a hellscape, bathed in an eerie white light and choked by the acrid stench of utter destruction. The Dragon Monarch stood amidst the devastation, his form a silhouette against the inferno, his crimson eyes blazing brighter than the fire itself. He was a terrifying god of destruction, reshaping the world with a single, devastating act of his will. Is that all you could muster? The Dragon Monarch mocked, his voice a thunderclap amidst the inferno. He towered over Kenzo, his draconic blade dripping with molten steel. Kenzo, his face grim, dropped into a fighting stance. He knew brute strength wouldn't win this fight. The Dragon Monarch swung his blade with terrifying force, each blow capable of leveling a city block. Kenzo danced around the attacks, a blur of black against the fiery backdrop. His movements were a whirlwind of shadow and agility, barely a hair's breadth away from the devastating edge of the sword. With every clash, the ground trembled. With every parry, a portion of the battlefield vaporized. Kenzo's shadow soldiers, caught in the periphery of the fight, were instantly reduced to wisps of smoke. Even the Dragon Monarch's own army flinched back, wary of being caught in the collateral damage of their leader's fury. Despite his masterful dodging, Kenzo knew this couldn't last. The Dragon Monarch's relentless assault was whittling down his stamina, the sheer proximity to the inferno sapping his strength. He needed an opening, a chance to strike back. But the Dragon Monarch fought with a controlled brutality, leaving no exploitable gaps. Divided by. While Kenzo weaved a desperate dance around the Dragon Monarch's onslaught, his shadow army waged its own war. Igris, the black flames of destruction dancing around his fists, and Belian, his colossal form a whirlwind of raw power, tore through the Dragon Monarch's beastly army. Each blow from Igris was a miniature inferno, incinerating the lesser creatures with a touch. Belian, a relentless storm, bulldozed through ranks of beasts, his immense size and strength leaving nothing but shattered bones and smoldering fur in his wake. Their movements were fueled by a singular purpose, to finish their fight quickly, to create an opening for Kenzo to strike back. The Dragon Monarch, while focused on crushing Kenzo, couldn't ignore the carnage his own army was suffering. A growl of annoyance rumbled from his throat. He loathed the thought of his forces being culled before they could serve their true purpose, the utter destruction of everything. Divided by. A cruel amusement flickered in the Dragon Monarch's crimson eyes as he surveyed the battlefield. Kenzo danced a desperate ballet around his attacks, but the tide was clearly turning. The Dragon Monarch's army, though suffering losses, was a relentless wave compared to Kenzo's limited forces. Igris and Belian, while impressive, were mere pebbles against the avalanche. Pathetic, the Dragon Monarch boomed, his voice echoing amidst the inferno. These creatures are but fodder. Their deaths merely pave the way for the true destruction to come. He unleashed another earth-shattering blow at Kenzo, the force of it momentarily pushing the Shadow Monarch back. Yet, a flicker of something akin to respect flickered in the Dragon Monarch's gaze. Kenzo's agility and resilience were undeniable, even against his overwhelming power. You fight with the tenacity of a cockroach, the Dragon Monarch grudgingly conceded. But even the most resilient vermin meets its end. He raised his draconic blade, the inferno swirling around it intensifying to a blinding white. This was it. The final blow that would crush Kenzo and leave him free to unleash his true purpose, the annihilation of everything. 8 as the Manado and Gojo are the main one competing, with Gojo being in the lead by 1 vote. Let me do an overview of how Manado technique will be integrated into the JJK verse. Do keep in mind this is the bare basic ... Don't want to spoil his whole set from this. Swift Mirage Curse Technique. 1. Teleportation strikes. Keitaro can instantly move from one point to another within his line of sight, akin to Minado's teleportation techniques. This allows him to execute lightning-fast attacks or evade incoming threats. 2. Curse Seal Marking. Keitaro can place cursed marks on targets upon physical contact. These marks act as beacons, enabling him to teleport directly to those locations at will. The more precise the marking, the faster the teleportation. 3. Temporal distortion. Keitaro can create a localized distortion in time, briefly slowing down his surroundings. This gives him a heightened perception of events and enhances his reaction speed during critical moments. 4. Mirage Afterimage. Keitaro can leave behind mirage-like afterimages as he moves, confusing opponents and making it challenging to predict his true location. 5. Curse Flash Step. Keitaro can perform rapid, short-range teleports in quick succession, creating a disorienting blur of motion. This technique is useful for both offense and defense, allowing him to outmaneuver adversaries effortlessly. As for the Gojo and Genshin, I did some stuff with Abyssal Energy to make something close to Curse Energy. I did also make some stuff about the Infinity, so it's not to Opus. Not revealing it now, but if it win y'all will see it. The tremor from Kenzo's shadow had barely subsided when the Shadow Monarch himself launched a surprise attack. In a blur of movement, he materialized directly in front of the newly emerged figure, a figure that remained shrouded in a veil of darkness. Before anyone could react, Kenzo slammed his hands together with a sharp crack. From his fingertips, a geyser of crimson erupted. It wasn't mere blood, but a condensed essence of his own cursed energy, propelled at an ungodly speed. The air around it crackled with a sonic boom so potent it pulverized everything within a 30-meter radius. The Dragon Monarch, momentarily distracted by the new move, barely had time to react. He raised his arm in a defensive maneuver, the draconic armor absorbing the brunt of the attack. The impact sent a shockwave through his entire being, leaving a searing gash across his forearm, the first true wound he'd sustained in the fight. A low growl rumbled from his throat, a mix of surprise and annoyance. "Is that all the Shadow Monarch can offer?" he bellowed, his voice tinged with disappointment. Kenzo, however, remained undeterred. A wide grin stretched across his face, revealing a glint of madness in his eyes. "How about you come and find out yourself?" he challenged, his voice laced with a dangerous edge. The scene presented a captivating tableau. The wounded Dragon Monarch, embodiment of raw destruction, towering over the grinning Kenzo, a figure fueled by desperate resolve. In the background, the newly emerged figure from the shadows cast a watchful and ominous presence. It was a standoff pregnant with untold power, a clash that could potentially decide the fate of the world. Who would emerge victorious? Divided by. The Dragon Monarch, his fiery grin replaced by a snarl, charged at Kenzo. The very air vibrated with the raw power of their impending collision. As they met, the ground groaned under the impact, the clash echoing like thunder throughout the battlefield. The force of it rippled through the air, sending shockwaves that reached far beyond the desolate fighting ground. In cities miles away, unsuspecting civilians stumbled, bewildered by the tremors that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. Kenzo, despite his smaller stature, fought with the ferocity of a cornered beast. He weaved between the Dragon Monarch's swings, using his agility and mastery of shadows to his advantage. While the Dragon Monarch's blows could shatter mountains, their sheer power and predictability made them easier to dodge. Kenzo, on the other hand, rained down a relentless storm of attacks. He materialized tendrils of shadow from the battlefield's debris, tripping the Monarch, then used a burst of darkness to teleport behind him, landing a solid hit on the exposed back. The Dragon Monarch roared in frustration, his fiery aura flickering dangerously. He was used to overwhelming his opponents with brute force, yet this nimble Shadow Monarch was proving to be a thorn in his side. Every time the Dragon Monarch lunged, Kenzo danced away, leaving behind a trail of destruction where the Monarch's fist connected with the ground. The battlefield itself became a weapon in Kenzo's hands. He manipulated the very shadows cast by the crumbling buildings, forming platforms to leap from, creating shadowy snares to momentarily bind the Monarch's movements. The fight was a bizarre ballet of destruction, a deadly dance between raw power and cunning tactics. Who would tire first, the relentless storm or the elusive shadow? Divided by. Kenzo gritted his teeth, a bead of sweat tracing a salty path down his temple. A sick feeling churned in his stomach as he watched the Dragon Monarch rampage across the battlefield. Shinjuku, once a vibrant city, was now a smoldering wasteland, a testament to the destructive power unleashed by this monstrous being. Finding another suitable location to fight was a pointless endeavor. Everything within range, it seemed, was fair game for the Dragon Monarch's insatiable hunger for annihilation. The very air crackled with a malevolent energy, a byproduct of his unleashed power. Despite the growing sense of dread, a flicker of defiance hardened Kenzo's resolve. He couldn't afford to falter. The fate of the world rested on his shoulders, on his ability to contain this destructive force. He had to find a way, any way, to turn the tide before everything was reduced to ashes. A glance towards the figure still shrouded in darkness, emanating from his own shadow, offered a sliver of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, this hidden power held the key to victory. But for now, Kenzo had to buy time, to distract the Dragon Monarch long enough for whatever power lurked within the shadows to manifest. With a renewed surge of adrenaline, Kenzo launched himself back into the fray. He became a whirlwind of shadow and steel, his movements a blur as he danced around the Dragon Monarch's furious attacks. Every dodge, every maneuver was a calculated risk, a desperate attempt to exploit the openings in the Monarch's relentless assault. The Dragon Monarch, increasingly frustrated by his elusive opponent, roared in fury. Buildings crumbled under the force of his swings, the ground itself cracked and heaved with each earth-shattering blow. Yet, Kenzo persisted, a relentless thorn in the side of the mighty beast. The scene was a horrifying tableau, a lone warrior, fueled by desperate hope, facing off against a destroyer god, laying waste to the world. The outcome hung in the balance, a knife edge between annihilation and a sliver of salvation. Divided by. Desperation gnawed at Kenzo. The Dragon Monarch's relentless assault was slowly pushing him towards his limits. The once vibrant city was a desolate wasteland, a chilling testament to the creature's destructive power. But giving up wasn't an option. The fate of the world rested on his shoulders, on his ability to contain the raging monster. Taking a deep breath, Kenzo made a gamble. He reached within himself, channeling the stolen curse technique, sky bending. Hero's power, the ability to manipulate the very fabric of space, surged through him. It was a desperate attempt, a technique he barely understood, but it was his only shot. With a battle cry, Kenzo propelled himself towards the Dragon Monarch. Just before contact, his fingers snapped, a sharp crack echoing through the ravaged landscape. It wasn't a physical attack, but a distortion of space itself. A small area directly in front of the Dragon Monarch's face warped and compressed, an invisible force crushing inwards. The effect was brutal. Instead of external wounds, the Dragon Monarch convulsed as his internal organs twisted and compressed under the unseen pressure. A strangled gurgle escaped his throat, his eyes widening in momentary surprise. But to Kenzo's annoyances, the surprise quickly morphed into something far more unsettling: excitement. A manic grin stretched across the Dragon Monarch's face, his crimson eyes blazing with a terrifying delight. Interesting, the monarch boomed, his voice a distorted rasp due to the internal damage. A curious technique. It seems you've unearthed a rather fascinating toy. He flexed his massive arms, and to Kenzo's utter annoyance, the damage inflicted by the sky-bending technique began to recede. The Dragon Monarch's body, fueled by his destructive essence, seemed to be rapidly healing itself. This newfound development sent a wave of despair crashing over Kenzo. Not only was his attack ineffective, but it had somehow invigorated the very being he was trying to vanquish. He had underestimated the Dragon Monarch's power, his capacity for destruction. "You fight a valiant fight, Shadow Monarch," the Dragon Monarch chuckled, the sound devoid of humor, laced only with a chilling anticipation. "But your efforts are futile. This world will crumble, and I will be the harbinger of its end. Now, allow me to demonstrate the true meaning of destruction." With a renewed surge of demonic energy, the Dragon Monarch lunged at Kenzo. Kenzo, heart hammering in his chest, knew this desperate gamble had failed. He had to regroup, to find another strategy, or all hope would be lost. But would he have that chance? The answer hung in the balance as he barely dodged the Dragon Monarch's earth-shattering blow, the battle hurtling towards a terrifying climax. "This is fun," the Dragon Monarch said as Kenzo sensed portal opening all throughout the battlefield. Kenzo looked around and the Dragon Monarch said, "You didn't think I came alone, did you know?" Kenzo felt it from all the portal, something strong would come out. He smiled upon saying it, exactly as he had planned it. Chapter came late due to me forgetting to rewrite the chapter. As blood fell down on Aaron's face, he had this crazy look on his face as he looked up at Sewell. He smiled brightly with a crazy expression on his face. "Ha ha ha, this is fun," Aaron said out loud. He was having fun. This would be good. "Insect," Sewell said as he sent an energy blast toward Aaron, who proceeded to jump above it before putting himself in the open. As Sewell tried his best to kill the black man, he just kept smiling and laughing to himself. This was incredibly fun to him. He would enjoy every single second of it. Aaron jumped at Sewell before using his hands to block Sewell's sight, and as Sewell prepared himself to dodge the hit, a bullet hit him in the chest, and Sewell stumbled back in pain and surprise. He didn't know what was happening and how did he get shot. He then looks up at Aaron before noticing a hole in the man's hands. This insane asshole used his hands to shoot him. With a surge of his own power, he slammed his fist against the nearest portal, distorting its energy flow. The tear in reality flickered and shrank, refusing to fully open. He repeated the process on another portal, and another, each gate stuttering in its attempt to birth its monstrous cargo. The Dragon Monarch, surprised by this unforeseen resistance, watched with a mixture of amusement and irritation. Kenzo, with a flourish of his own, began teleporting the portals and their monstrous occupants across Shinjuku. It was a chaotic symphony of distorted light and panicked roars, scattering the Dragon Monarch's reinforcements all over the devastated city. "Let's end this," Kenzo finally said, his voice ringing with a newfound confidence. His posture straightened, a powerful aura emanating from him. The Dragon Monarch scoffed. "End this? Ho, do you think you can handle me so quickly? Planning to rush to your friend's aid against the other monarchs? How pathetic. Maybe you need a reminder of who deserves your full focus." The Dragon Monarch roared, and with a gesture, unleashed his full power. The air crackled with raw destructive energy, a wave of oppressive dread crashing down on the battlefield. The very ground trembled in fear. Yet, Kenzo stood his ground, unfazed. A slow smile spread across his face. "It's about time I get serious," he rasped, his voice low and dangerous. With a surge of his own cursed energy, his entire body began to transform. Black and purple energy swirled around him, coalescing into a menacing suit of armor. His eyes, once human, now glowed with an ominous purple light, reflecting the true power of the Shadow Monarch. The battlefield had fallen silent. The fight was about to enter its final, most dangerous phase. Divided by a distorted shimmer pulsed from one of the scattered portals at the edge of the ravaged Shinjuku. As the portal solidified, a figure stepped out, his gaze sweeping across the battlefield with a predatory glint. This was Yagumont, the monarch of Transfiguration, cloaked in a tattered blackish-purple hood that concealed most of his face. A chilling red symbol glowed on his torso, a blood-red blob that pulsed with an unsettling rhythm. Yagumont, eager to unleash chaos upon this new world, took a menacing step forward. Yet, his advance was abruptly halted. Standing in his path was a figure that seemed utterly out of place amidst the destruction. A teenager with dark circles under his eyes, exhaustion etched onto his young face. Intrigue flickered in Yagumont's crimson eyes. He could sense a powerful entity bound to the boy, a hidden beast waiting to be unleashed. Perhaps a suitable vessel for his transfiguration powers, a way to amplify his own destructive potential. "Let go, Rika," the boy muttered, fatigue lacing his voice. He slipped a ring onto his finger, the metal glinting momentarily in the smoldering landscape. The moment the ring settled, the air crackled with a surge of power. A monstrous entity materialized behind the boy, a hulking beast with razor-sharp claws and eyes burning with a feral rage. Yagumont, a cruel smile twisting his masked lips, tilted his head in amusement. "Interesting," he rasped, his voice raspy and laced with a hint of anticipation. A puppeteer in his monstrous puppet. It seems even this backwater world has its entertainment. Divided by. From the shimmering gateway emerged a figure that exuded both power and arrogance. Tarnak, the monarch of Iron Body. His appearance was a stark contrast to the desolate surroundings. A handsome young man with slick blonde hair and piercing green eyes, adorned in a pristine white coat with a crimson collar and golden accents. Tarnak, however, was far from pleased. He'd been ripped away from the main battle, his annoyance evident in the way his brow furrowed. But his irritation quickly simmered down into something far more dangerous, a cold fury. Standing between him and his return to the carnage was a figure he considered utterly insignificant, a lone human teenager. This was Yuji Itadori, and unlike Tarnak's disdain, his eyes burned with resolute determination. He wasn't fazed by the imposing figure of the monarch. He'd faced monstrous beings before, and he wouldn't back down now. His body tensed, his stance a perfect blend of power and agility, a testament to countless hours of honing his skills. Tarnak scoffed, a sound dripping with contempt. How dare a mere human challenge a being of his caliber? He raised a hand, his eyes glowing with a sinister light. Here, before this insignificant speck, he would demonstrate the true meaning of iron, unbreakable, unstoppable, and utterly destructive. Divided by. Yuji's eyes narrowed as Tarnak's hand began to glow with an ominous light. This guy oozed arrogance, but Yuji had faced arrogance before, and worse. He wasn't afraid. He gripped his fist tighter, a surge of cursed energy coursing through his veins. "You seem awfully confident for someone who just got yanked away from the big fight," Yuji said, his voice surprisingly steady. "Maybe you're not as tough as you look." Tarnak's smirk faltered for a split second, replaced by a flicker of surprise. A human speaking back. The audacity. But the surprise quickly morphed back into fury. Did this weakling truly not understand the power he faced? "Silence, worm," Tarnak roared, his voice booming across the desolate landscape. "I, Tarnak, monarch of Iron Body, will crush you into dust." He unleashed a torrent of energy from his glowing hand, a wave of pure, destructive force aimed directly at Yuji. The air crackled with power, the very ground trembling under the impending impact. Divided by. A wave of heat shimmered across the ravaged cityscape, distorting the air itself. From another scattered portal emerged Baron, the monarch of White Flame, a hulking figure radiating an aura of searing heat. His demonic visage, gray skin, glowing white eyes, and blazing white hair instilled fear in even the most hardened warriors. Baron surveyed the desolate battlefield, his gaze eventually landing on a lone figure standing defiant amidst the destruction. This human, Hakari, was a curious sight. Tall and muscular with a mischievous glint in his magenta eyes, he seemed almost eager to face the monstrous being. Baron's surprise only deepened when Hakari flashed a wide grin. "Oh, this feels good," the human chuckled, a hint of manic excitement lacing his voice. "Let's get this party started." Before Baron could react, Hakari made a series of strange hand gestures, muttering a cryptic phrase, "domain expansion." Idle death gamble. The air around him crackled with a strange energy, and the very fabric of reality seemed to warp. An invisible barrier descended, encompassing a large portion of the battlefield, cutting them off from the rest of the chaos. Baron, momentarily caught off guard by this unexpected display of power, found himself trapped within a confined space with this strange human. A flicker of annoyance crossed his fiery gaze. He, a monarch, contained by a mere mortal. This was an insult that demanded immediate correction. With a roar that shook the very ground, Baron unleashed a torrent of white-hot flames from his hands. The inferno engulfed the area within the domain, the searing heat warping the air itself. Yet, as the flames subsided, Baron found Hakari still standing, a manic grin plastered across his face. "Not bad at all," Hakari exclaimed, his voice laced with a hint of amusement. "But can you keep it up?" The scene within the domain crackled with a strange energy, a deadly game of chance unfolding between the human gambler and the fiery monarch. The outcome hung in the balance, another battle within the larger conflict raging across the ravaged city. Would Hakari's gamble pay off, or would Baron's flames consume him whole? Kenzo executed a well-practiced roll, narrowly avoiding the dragon monarch's earth-shattering blow. A satisfied smirk played on his lips as he saw a bead of crimson welling up on the creature's chin, a testament to the effectiveness of his previous strike. The dragon monarch's laughter echoed through the ravaged cityscape, a sound laced with a disturbing delight. "Excellent," he roared, his voice booming with sadistic pleasure. "You've managed to draw blood. You are proving to be a most entertaining opponent." He swiped his tongue across his lips, savoring the metallic tang of his own blood. "Don't hold back, Shadow Monarch," he bellowed. "Show me the true extent of your power. Unleash everything you have, for I crave a challenge worthy of my might." A thrill, not of despair, but of cautious excitement, shot through Kenzo. This creature thrived on destruction, fueled by the pain it inflicted. Every attack he landed, every ounce of power he unleashed, was a calculated risk designed to exploit that very weakness. His gaze flickered briefly to the figure still shrouded in shadow, emanating from his own darkness. Perhaps the key to victory still lay within. But for now, he had a job to do. Kenzo needed to disrupt the Dragon Monarch's momentum, to create an opening. With a flick of his wrist, tendrils of dark energy erupted from the battlefield debris, coiling around the Dragon Monarch's limbs like serpents. The creature roared in frustration, momentarily restrained. "This charade ends now," Kenzo declared, his voice calm and steady despite the chaos surrounding him. Every action, every movement, flowed with practiced precision. He channeled his cursed energy, focusing it into a single, powerful point at his fist. The Dragon Monarch strained against the binds, his crimson eyes blazing with fury. Here was the opening Kenzo had been waiting for. With a surge of calculated aggression, Kenzo launched himself forward, aiming for a critical point on the Dragon Monarch's monstrous form. The air crackled with dark energy as his fist, imbued with his full might, hurtled towards its target. The fate of the battle hung in the balance. Would Kenzo's precise attack find its mark, or would the Dragon Monarch break free from his restraints and unleash another wave of devastation upon the ruined city? Divided by. The Dragon Monarch roared in fury, his monstrous form writhing as he ripped through Kenzo's shadow binds with a surge of raw power. The tendrils of darkness dissipated into wisps of smoke, their brief restraint shattered. Kenzo, ever the pragmatist, executed a flawless dodge, leaping just out of reach of the Dragon Monarch's flailing fist. A berserker, fueled by his own bloodlust, Kenzo analyzed with a flicker of grim understanding. This wasn't a creature fueled by reason, but by a primal hunger for destruction. Brute force wouldn't be enough. He needed to exploit this berserker state, wait for an opening. A pang of frustration lanced through him. The shadow soldiers he'd painstakingly crafted were rendered useless, bound to Gojo's shadow. But a surge of hope followed. He sensed it from miles away, two domains clashing, the unmistakable energy signature of Gojo Satoru. Gojo was holding his ground, it seemed. Just a little longer, Kenzo thought, his expression hardening with resolve. Every second Gojo held his domain meant Sukuna, the king of curses trapped within Megumi, grew weaker. With each passing moment, the chance to control the shadow soldier currently bound to Itadori grew stronger. He couldn't afford to be reckless. He needed to conserve his energy, wait for the right moment. Every calculated attack, every strategic movement was a chess piece in this high-stakes game. He glanced towards the Dragon Monarch, who was now tearing through the battlefield with the destructive glee of a child breaking toys. A grim smile tugged at the corner of Kenzo's lips. Let him waste his energy, he thought. The real battle starts when he's exhausted. Kenzo focused on his own cursed energy, channeling it through his body. Divided by. The air crackled with a raw energy that defied description as Gojo's blindingly white infinity domain collided against Sukuna's oppressive malevolent shrine. The two domains, diametrically opposed forces, battled for supremacy, their clash rippling across the battlefield like a relentless earthquake. At the heart of this maelstrom stood Gojo and Sukuna, not as mere combatants, but as strategic geniuses locked in a battle of wills. Gojo's signature white hair whipped around him like a halo as he effortlessly deflected a swipe of Sukuna's claws. His blue eyes, usually playful, held a glint of steely resolve. Sukuna, the king of curses, met Gojo's gaze with his own crimson eyes, burning with a calculating intensity. Both sorcerers knew this wasn't a brawl, but a chess match played at lightning speed, a war of attrition fought with devastating cursed energy. Sukuna moved with measured aggression, each blow a calculated test of Gojo's defenses. His immense cursed energy crackled around him, a potent weapon seeking an opening in Gojo's seemingly impenetrable infinity. Gojo, the sorcerer supreme, flowed around Sukuna's attacks like water around a rock, his every movement a testament to his unmatched speed and control. The two strongest Jujutsu sorcerers alive were locked in a deadly dance, pushing each other to their limits. Gojo's movements blurred, a whirlwind of white and black. He unleashed a flurry of blindingly fast punches and kicks, each aimed at Sukuna's pressure points with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Sukuna, no mindless brute, countered with the agility of a predator honed by millennia of battle. He twisted and contorted his body, using his own cursed energy to enhance his movements, dodging most of Gojo's attacks with practiced ease. A smile played on Gojo's lips, not a playful one this time, but the smile of a predator recognizing a worthy adversary. This wasn't a fight he could win with mere showmanship. Sukuna was a strategic genius, his intellect as formidable as his cursed energy. Divided by. A feral grin split Sukuna's face as Gojo's once impenetrable domain shattered. His sure hit slashes, previously nullified, materialized with a deafening crackle of cursed energy. 1,000 crimson lines erupted across Gojo's body, threatening to tear him asunder. But the sorcerer supreme, ever the anomaly, remained standing. His nigh unbelievable reverse curse technique kicked in, healing the wounds even as they were inflicted. However, the reprieve was temporary. As Sukuna lunged in for the final blow, a figure emerged from Gojo's distorted shadow. Not Gojo himself, but a shadow soldier, materialized just in time to intercept Sukuna's attack. The newcomer, revealed to be Kashimo, let out a feral roar, his eyes glinting with bloodthirsty excitement. His curse technique, mythical beast, Amber, crackled to life around him, transforming his arm into a monstrous, clawed limb. The grin on Sukuna's face faltered for a second, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. He hadn't expected this turn of events. The clash of titans was immediate and brutal. Kashimo, fueled by his love for battle, swung his monstrous claw with reckless abandon, forcing Sukuna back a step. The king of curses, though surprised by the sudden intervention, quickly adapted. A playful smirk returned to his lips as he countered with a flurry of devastating blows. Gojo, using the distraction, disengaged and escaped the domain's range. With a sigh of relief, he focused his cursed energy, mending the wounds inflicted by Sukuna's onslaught. Inside his mind, a flicker of frustration momentarily replaced his usual confidence. Back in the heart of the battle, Sukuna scoffed. "Damn brat," he muttered, a fleeting image of Kenzo flashing through his mind. He knew the shadow soldier wouldn't last long, but it was enough to buy Gojo valuable time. The king of curses, however, wasn't about to let his prey slip away so easily. His crimson eyes narrowed, focusing on the unexpected challenger before him. This fight had just gotten a little more interesting. And I apologize for the chapter coming late, but schoolwork for some reason have been doubling, meaning I get less time to write. Chapter will come later now, but not any later than around 5 p.m. Anyway, have a nice day. Divided by. A.N. As the Genshin story winning here is a small snippet of the very rough draft I have. Keep in mind it won't publish looking like this. Got to make improve the grammar with Grammarly and AI. Suddenly as he was walking around his eyes saw something. What seemed to be negative energy. How could he see that? As he followed the trace of the negative energy, his eyes eventually landed on what seemed to be a bare-chested and bare-footed creature that seemed to possess a large mane covering most of its head. It appears to have 2 elongated ears sticking out of his mane. The only clothing he wore was a loincloth, while arms and legs were loosely wrapped in bandages. This one seemed to be holding what seemed to be a wooden stick, but what most confused the child was the fact that this creature seemed to possess a decently huge amount of that negative energy. He called it negative energy because of how it felt. It didn't feel good. The air was thick with dust and the metallic tang of blood. Kenzo stood amidst a desolate wasteland, the once proud buildings of Shinjuku reduced to rubble by the Dragon Monarch's relentless onslaught. The monstrous creature loomed large, its eyes glowing with a sadistic glee as it regarded Kenzo with predatory amusement. The Dragon Monarch roared, launching itself at Kenzo with earth-shattering force. A manic grin spread across its monstrous face as it grasped Kenzo by the head, intending to slam him into the shattered concrete. But in a flash of dark energy, Kenzo vanished. In his place, one of his meticulously crafted shadow soldiers materialized just in time to receive the full brunt of the attack. The monstrous fist connected with a sickening thud, sending the shadow soldier flying through the debris. Interesting way to fight. Using the weak to survive, the Dragon Monarch chuckled, its voice a booming rumble. Its amusement only fueled Kenzo's resolve. With a stoic expression, Kenzo opened his mouth, his voice echoing in the ruined cityscape. "You shouldn't mock them," he declared, a hint of steel lacing his words. "By the end of this, you will be one of them." The Dragon Monarch's grin widened, a predator intrigued by its prey's defiance. "I like that arrogance," it boomed, its voice laced with a hint of begrudging respect. Kenzo closed the distance between them in a blur of movement. In this fight, his strength paled in comparison to the Dragon Monarch's raw power. But Kenzo wasn't brute force, he was strategy and precision. He weaved around the Dragon Monarch's monstrous swings, exploiting its sheer size to his advantage. Each attack, every maneuver, was a calculated risk aimed at finding a weakness. The clash became a deadly dance on a stage of devastation. The Dragon Monarch rained down blows with devastating force, each one leaving deep craters in the already ruined landscape. Kenzo, with his nimble movements and shadow soldier tactics, chipped away at the creature, his cursed energy empowering his attacks. Their battle raged on, a testament to the unwavering will of a lone sorcerer against a destructive god. Would Kenzo's calculated precision triumph over the Dragon Monarch's overwhelming power? Or would the desolate wasteland become a testament to the destruction brought by the monstrous being? The battle hung in the balance, waiting to be tipped by the next strategic move, the next desperate attack. Divided by. Kenzo mentally sighed to himself, this would be harder than he though. He could feel the connection he had to that shadow soldier vanish as the Dragon Monarch reduced the shadow soldier to nothing more than ashes. Kenzo used his control over the gravity to pull the Dragon Monarch toward him before he suddenly surrounded them inside a gravitational field of some sort where he had full control over everything that was happening inside. Before using his control over gravity to do something he had learned from Yuki. As Kenzo got into position as the Dragon Monarch came toward him, Kenzo landed a solid punch in the Dragon Monarch's stomach which caused him to puke out a huge amount of blood. The impact sent shockwaves through the ravaged landscape. A torrent of crimson erupted from the Dragon Monarch's maw as it was sent hurtling backwards, the force of the punch augmented by Kenzo's gravity manipulation. Its monstrous form slammed into a nearby mountain, carving a crater and sending tremors through the earth. A heavy silence descended for a moment. Then, a booming laugh erupted from the dust cloud obscuring the impact zone. The Dragon Monarch emerged, its face twisted in a gruesome grin, blood dripping down its chin. "This is fun," it roared, its voice laced with a disturbing delight even amidst the pain. The dust settled around the Dragon Monarch, its monstrous form shaking off the debris. Blood dripped down its chin, a testament to the impact of Kenzo's attack. Yet, an undying thrill coursed through the creature. This wasn't just a fight anymore, it was a game, a challenge that had awakened a primal hunger within it. That was exhilarating. The Dragon Monarch bellowed, its voice echoing through the ruined cityscape. A predatory glint flickered in its crimson eyes as it focused on Kenzo. "How did you manage such a blow? Tell me your secrets, Shadow Monarch." Kenzo, ever the pragmatist, remained unfazed by the creature's excitement. He studied the Dragon Monarch for a moment, his own eyes narrowed in concentration. Then, with a stoic expression, he began to explain. "It wasn't raw power alone," Kenzo said, his voice calm and measured. "I manipulated the battlefield's gravity to my advantage." The Dragon Monarch's head tilted, a flicker of curiosity momentarily replacing the bloodlust in its gaze. "So that field you created was not for show, huh?" "By creating a localized field," Kenzo continued, ignoring the surprise on the creature's face. "Within that field, I could increase the effective mass of my fist. The impact wasn't just from my own strength, but from the amplified force of gravity itself. The Dragon Monarch's grin widened, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. An interesting trick, it rumbled, its voice laced with grudging respect. But will it be enough to stop a being like me? Kenzo didn't respond. He knew words wouldn't sway this creature. He had revealed his tactic, not out of arrogance, but because underestimating his opponent would be a fatal mistake. Divided by. A steely glint flickered in Kenzo's eyes. He knew brute force wouldn't win this brawl, and his last maneuver had bought him precious time to formulate a daring plan, a gamble inspired by Gojo's infinity. With a surge of cursed energy, he channeled it not outwards, but inwards, manipulating the very fabric of gravity within his own body. This wasn't just about increasing his density, it was about manipulating the very essence of gravity itself. Sweat beaded on Kenzo's brow as he focused his power to an excruciating degree. He needed to create two singularities, two warped points in space-time, a white hole, a spewing source of immense energy, and a black hole, a point of infinite density that devoured everything around it. It was a technique bordering on forbidden, the immense strain threatening to tear him apart. But for the sake of stopping this destructive entity, he had to try. With a guttural roar, Kenzo unleashed his creation. Two swirling spheres materialized in the air before him, one a blinding white, the other an inkai black, existing in an impossible proximity. They pulsed with a terrifying energy, threatening to rip the very fabric of reality apart. The Dragon Monarch, sensing the immense power emanating from the spheres, roared in challenge. It opened its maw, unleashing a torrent of white-hot fire that incinerated everything in its path. The flames engulfed the nascent singularities, momentarily flickering in their intensity. But then, with a surge of Kenzo's will, the spheres pulsed once more, their power overwhelming the dragon's fire. In a blinding flash of light, the white hole and the black hole collided, forced together by Kenzo's desperate control. The result was a terrifying anomaly, a miniature singularity, a swirling vortex of unimaginable power that defied comprehension. Before the Dragon Monarch could react, Kenzo hurled the anomaly with all his remaining strength. It hurtled towards the monstrous creature, a beacon of destruction. The Dragon Monarch, fueled by its battle lust, raised a claw to intercept, its laughter echoing through the ruins. The anomaly collided with the Dragon Monarch's claw, and for a horrifying moment there was silence. Then a shockwave erupted, throwing both the Dragon Monarch and Kenzo back with unimaginable force. The ground liquefied, buildings crumbled into dust, and a crater the size of a city block formed where the impact occurred. Kenzo coughed, blood trickling down his chin. His entire body ached, the strain of creating and manipulating such a technique pushing him to his limits. He looked towards the crater, a flicker of hope battling against the overwhelming fear. The Dragon Monarch emerged from the dust cloud, its monstrous form battered, scorched, and missing an entire arm. Yet, the creature wasn't defeated. It stood tall, its crimson eyes blazing with an even greater ferocity. A roar of pure, unadulterated joy erupted from its maw, a sound that sent shivers down Kenzo's spine. This wasn't just a resilient opponent, this was a being that thrived on destruction, a creature that reveled in the chaos it caused. Kenzo knew this fight was far from over. He had wounded the Dragon Monarch, but he hadn't subdued it. In fact, he might have just ignited a far more terrifying battle rage within the monstrous being. He had to act fast, to devise a new strategy before the Dragon Monarch unleashed its full fury upon the world. The gamble had paid off momentarily, but the true test was yet to come. Divided by. A wave of disbelief washed over Kenzo's face as the dust settled around the Dragon Monarch. The monstrous creature stood there, battered, scorched, and missing an entire arm. Yet, it wasn't defeated. In fact, it seemed to be thriving on the punishment. A primal roar erupted from its maw, a sound that echoed with a disturbing glee. This wasn't just a powerful opponent, this was a being that reveled in destruction, a creature that seemed to grow stronger the more damage it took. Kenzo felt his resolve harden into a cold determination. This wasn't a fight he could win with brute force or clever tactics alone. He needed to end this, and fast. He needed to unleash everything at his disposal. With a deep breath, he channeled his cursed energy, the air around him crackling with a dark power. Domain expansion. He began, his voice echoing with a newfound urgency, realm of the Obsidian Sovereign. The world dissolved into darkness. The ravaged landscape, the crumbling buildings, the very sky, all vanished, replaced by an infinite expanse of obsidian rock. Gravity pulsed within this domain, a constant, oppressive force that weighed down on everything. The Dragon Monarch, momentarily disoriented, found itself trapped, its monstrous form struggling against the crushing weight of Kenzo's domain. Within the realm of the Obsidian Sovereign, Kenzo was the absolute ruler. He manipulated gravity with an ease he could never achieve in the outside world. the very fabric of reality bent to his will, amplifying his own strength and speed while simultaneously weakening his opponent. Inside this domain, I am your god. Kenzo inhaled deeply. Suddenly, from the floor, a surge of shadowy soldiers materialized. The Dragon Monarch recognized them instantly. His own fallen soldiers, now animated puppets under Kenzo's control. A grin stretched across the Dragon Monarch's face at the prospect. As his dragons unleashed their attacks, he prepared to block them. However, the attacks seemed to materialize only at the point of impact, bypassing any attempt at defense. Fascinating, the Dragon Monarch said, his voice brimming with excitement. So, this is your little trick. Kenzo watched as the Dragon Monarch engulfed himself in a shimmering aura of flame. Any attack, real or spectral, that dared to touch him was instantly consumed by the inferno. This would be a challenge, Kenzo thought, but he was prepared. With a burst of speed, Kenzo launched himself at the Dragon Monarch, landing a solid punch to his face. The Dragon Monarch, surprisingly, grinned in response. He seemed to be enjoying the fight. The clash resumed, with the Dragon Monarch now facing a double threat. He had to contend with Kenzo's relentless assault while simultaneously fending off the spectral attacks materializing around him. Kenzo's grin widened. What seemed like the Dragon Monarch's near unbreakable defenses were crumbling under the relentless assault of his domain's sure hits. This unexpected vulnerability sparked a thrill in Kenzo. Seizing the opportunity, he pressed the attack with renewed ferocity, raining down a barrage of blows on the Dragon Monarch without a moment's pause. Exhaustion was a distant concern. Kenzo focused solely on inflicting maximum damage, even increasing his own mass to amplify the force of his attacks. With a final, desperate surge, he materialized a miniature black hole mere inches from the Dragon Monarch's mouth. He spared no effort, unleashing most of his arsenal against his adversary. The Dragon Monarch, while visibly battered, seemed to revel in the fight. He fought back with surprising vigor despite the punishment he was enduring. The Dragon Monarch roared with laughter, a sound that echoed through the battlefield. Yes, yes, this is precisely why I came. To fight, to struggle, to feel the surge of power in response to yours. His grin stretched even wider, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Kenzo stared in disbelief. The Dragon Monarch unleashed a wave of mana so potent it caused the air to crackle. He still has that much left, Kenzo muttered, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. What a monster. Undeterred, the Dragon Monarch cauterized his wounds with a burst of flame, the stench of burning flesh filling the air. He wouldn't be slowed down by something as trivial as blood loss. Kenzo gritted his teeth. This wasn't going as planned. He pushed his domain further, his body expanding to a size he never thought possible. Muscles strained and bones creaked under the immense pressure, but he ignored the pain. With a thunderous roar, he charged at the Dragon Monarch, a living battering ram. The Dragon Monarch threw up his arms in a desperate attempt to block. But Kenzo's fist was an unstoppable force. It smashed through the Dragon Monarch's defenses, connecting with a sickening crunch. The Dragon Monarch staggered back, a look of surprise flashing across his face for the first time. Meanwhile, within Hakari's domain, Baron, the White Flame Monarch, watched with narrowed eyes as Kinji Hakari danced within a swirling vortex of cursed energy. The dark energy seemed to flow in and out of Hakari's body in an unsettling rhythm. A slow grin spread across Baron's face as realization dawned. In the 4 minutes and 11 seconds since Hakari had triggered this phenomenon, this jackpot as he called it, he had become effectively immortal. Hakari's eyes snapped open, locking onto Baron. With a predatory grin, he launched himself at the White Flame Monarch. Baron reacted instinctively, his blade flashing in a silver arc. The razor-sharp edge sliced cleanly through Hakari's wrist. But to Baron's utter astonishment, the severed hand instantly regenerated, tendrils of dark energy weaving the flesh back together. The reattached limb lashed out, a fist connecting with Baron's jaw with a sickening thud. The impact sent a jolt of pain through Baron, but a surprising surge of exhilaration followed. This wasn't just a fight, it was a game, a twisted dance of regeneration and destruction. And Baron, for the first time in a long time, was truly enjoying himself. The White Flame Monarch, Baron, unleashed a torrent of searing flames that engulfed the area. Hakari, undeterred, charged straight through the inferno, his laughter echoing amidst the crackle of burning debris. The flames licked at his skin, leaving behind sizzling welts that vanished almost as soon as he passed through them. "You are a curious human indeed," Baron boomed, tossing his swords aside. The futility of using weapons against this regenerating foe was evident. "Then let's see how you fare against my bare hands." Hakari grinned, his eyes gleaming with a manic glint. "Don't come crying to me when you lose," he retorted, his voice raw from the constant regeneration. Baron dropped into a fighting stance, muscles coiling beneath his pale skin. The two warriors collided in a flurry of fists and fury. Baron rained down a relentless barrage of blows, each one leaving a crater of raw flesh on Hikari's body. Yet, with each sickening thud, the wounds knitted themselves back together, a gruesome ballet of destruction and renewal. Hikari, impervious to the pain, fought back with wild abandon, his own punches leaving similar marks on Baron's form. This wasn't a duel of skill, but a test of pure endurance. It was a brutal spectacle, a clash of wills that defied the very concept of mortality. Who would break first? The relentless onslaught, or the defiant resilience fueled by cursed energy? The answer hung heavy in the air as the fight raged on. On another part of the battlefield, sweat streamed down Yuji's face as he traded blows with the Iron Body Monarch, Tark. Each punch Yuji landed felt like striking a solid steel wall. Frustration gnawed at him. "Don't you get it, human?" Tark boomed, his voice laced with arrogance. "You can't even scratch me." Yuji gritted his teeth, refusing to give in to despair. "We'll see about that," he muttered, dropping into a fighting stance. Tark charged, a battering ram of iron and muscle. Yuji sidestepped the blow with practiced ease, his reflexes honed from countless battles. As Tark lumbered past, Yuji unleashed a flurry of punches, culminating in a well-timed black flash. A spark of cursed energy crackled around his fist as it connected with Tark's gut. A metallic clang echoed through the air, followed by a deep groan from the Iron Body Monarch. A dent, almost invisible to the naked eye, marred Tark's previously flawless armor. Yuji's eyes narrowed. He'd landed a clean hit, but the damage was minimal. "This guy's a tank," he thought, a flicker of worry creeping into his mind. Tark, however, reacted with a fury unlike anything Yuji had witnessed before. His face contorted in rage. How dare this puny human damage him? But then, a deeper, more primal sensation washed over him, a searing pain that seemed to pierce his very soul. His eyes widened as a horrifying realization dawned on him. Yuji's black flash hadn't just dented his armor, it had bypassed his defenses and struck something far more fundamental, his very essence. The fight between Yuji and Tark intensified. Yuji, fueled by determination, hammered away at the same spot on Tark's chest, the point where the black flash had connected. Tark roared in frustration, his punches a blur as he tried to connect with the nimble Yuji. Suddenly, a searing pain ripped through Tark, a blow that felt like it originated from nowhere and everywhere at once. He lurched back, searching for his attacker, but his vision was filled with nothing but Yuji's retreating form. Little did he know, Yuji had unleashed his divergent fist technique. It created a temporal dissonance, a split second of lag that made his strikes appear to happen twice. With a smirk, Yuji deactivated the technique and delivered another blow to the same vulnerable spot, another perfectly timed black flash. This time, the effect was undeniable. Tark crumpled, his face contorted in agony. The ironclad exterior meant nothing now. Yuji had bypassed the physical and struck directly at Tark's soul, and with each black flash, the damage intensified. The tide of the battle seemed to shift across the battlefield. Yuta, locked in combat with Yagumont, the Transfiguration Monarch, was starting to gain a strategic edge. While Yagumont's abilities were undeniably troublesome, raw power seemed to be lacking. The real challenge lay in finding a permanent solution. Thankfully, thanks to Kenzo's intervention, Yuta's restriction on Rika had been altered. Her manifestation time was no longer a mere 5 minutes. Instead, a new limitation took its place, a restriction on specific curse techniques. Yuta could now summon Rika for extended periods, but could only utilize a particular curse technique for 5 minutes before a cooldown period. This change was a game changer. Yuta could now fight with a renewed focus on strategy, his cursed energy reserves bolstered by Rika's presence. All that remained was to devise a way to defeat the elusive Yagumont. Meanwhile, Rika herself had become a whirlwind of destruction, decimating Yagumont's mage army with ruthless efficiency. The once ferocious horde stood no chance against her spectral fury. The battlefield was a canvas of chaos, each location a microcosm of the desperate struggle for dominance. The tide was turning. Yuta launched himself at Yagumont, unleashing a devastating thin ice breaker. The curse technique tore through the battlefield, leaving a trail of shattered earth and Yagumont's surprised cry in its wake. Seizing the momentary advantage, Yuta switched tactics, summoning a torrent of frigid air that encased Yagumont in a rapidly solidifying prison of ice. With his opponent momentarily immobilized, Yuta gathered every ounce of his strength. He supercharged his fist, imbuing it with incredible mass using another curse technique. The air crackled with power as he unleashed a haymaker, the sheer force of the blow promising annihilation. However, Yagumont was a cunning opponent. Just as Yuta's fist was about to connect, a barrage of magical attacks slammed into the battlefield. Rika, caught off guard by the sudden assault, couldn't deflect them all. Yuta was struck by a few stray blasts, wincing in pain as searing heat coursed through his body. But Yuta was no stranger to pain. Without missing a beat, he activated a reverse curse technique, the sickly green energy washing over his wounds and mending them in seconds. Ignoring the throbbing ache, Yuta renewed his assault, raining down a relentless barrage of attacks on Yagumont's icy prison. He knew he couldn't keep the Transfiguration Monarch trapped for long. Time was of the essence. He had to deliver a decisive blow before Yagumont found an escape. Gojo watched with a narrowed gaze as the lifeless husk of Kashimo crumpled to the ground. The rogue sorcerer had served his purpose, a pawn sacrificed to buy Gojo enough time to escape the reach of Sukuna's domain, where his infinity technique would be nullified. But Kashimo's role went deeper. He had served as a distraction, allowing Gojo's curse technique burnout to reach its final stage. Now, Gojo was finally free to unleash his full power against the King of Curses without resorting to the taxing process of repeatedly destroying and healing his brain with a reverse curse technique. His gaze shifted towards a swirling vortex of shadows within the domain. A chilling realization dawned on him as his 6 eyes, the pinnacle of Jujutsu observation, pierced through the veil of darkness. A wheel. So, that's it, Gojo thought, a flicker of concern crossing his usually stoic expression. He's using Megumi's soul to fuel the adaptation process. The implication was clear. Sukuna was attempting to evolve, to break free from the limitations imposed by his incomplete form. This development added a new layer of urgency to the battle. Gojo couldn't afford to waste any more time. He had to find a way to sever Sukuna's connection to Megumi and put an end to this twisted evolution before it was too late. The fate of the entire Jujutsu world hung in the balance. Gojo sighed, a rare flicker of frustration crossing his face. He needed to finish this quickly, before Mahoraga fully adapted to his limitless. A glint of realization sharpened his gaze as he noticed the spinning wheel within Sukuna's domain abruptly halt. He recalled using his limitless to momentarily disorient the King of Curses, creating an opening for an attack. However, Sukuna's domain amplification technique should have prevented Mahoraga from adapting during that brief window of vulnerability. Domain amplification basically disable curse techniques, Gojo thought, piecing together the puzzle. If the wheel represents Mahoraga's adaptation process, it shouldn't have been active then. This meant Mahoraga could only have adapted to a single category of Gojo's abilities, most likely his blue technique, which governed attraction, and possibly his domain expansion. The 3 techniques unleashed by Kenzo were also potential targets, but Mahoraga's adaptation was limited to 1 at a time. A wry smile played on Gojo's lips. This revelation confirmed his suspicions. He still held the upper hand. Mahoraga may have evolved, but it was a limited evolution. Gojo, with his arsenal of techniques and his unparalleled 6 eyes, could still exploit its weaknesses. The tide was turning, and Gojo, the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer, was ready to claim victory. Divided by. The air crackled with cursed energy, a storm brewing between the 2 figures locked in a deadly dance. Gojo, his sapphire eyes gleaming with lethal focus, moved like a phantom. His white coat whipped around him as he unleashed a surge of infinity, warping the very space around Sukuna, forcing the King of Curses to contort himself to avoid the attack. Sukuna, a monstrous grin splitting his face, reveled in the chaos. Clad in ragged clothing stained with blood, he unleashed a torrent of slashing attacks with his clawed hands. Each blow ripped through the air, leaving behind trails of warped reality that threatened to tear the world asunder. Gojo met them head-on, his own inhuman speed a blur as he dodged and deflected. The ground beneath them wasn't spared. With a thunderous stomp, Sukuna shattered the concrete, sending debris flying. Gojo, in retaliation, launched a blast of his limitless technique, a sphere of pure cursed energy that detonated on impact, carving a crater into the already devastated landscape. Their fight was a clash of titans, raw power meeting unparalleled technique. Gojo, a whirlwind of white, utilized his 6 eyes to dissect Sukuna's every move, his infinity warping around him like an invisible shield. Yet, Sukuna's curse techniques were as brutal as they were potent. Dismal blades, imbued with malevolent energy, rained down on Gojo, who weaved through them with inhuman grace, his every motion a testament to his honed senses. Neither held back. Gojo, his face etched with grim determination, unleashed his full power. Sukuna, roaring with laughter, his bloodlust a tangible force in the air. This wasn't just a battle, it was a war between 2 forces that could reshape the world. Buildings crumbled as they became collateral damage in their fight. Shockwaves rippled outward, shattering windows and sending tremors through the surrounding city. This wasn't a fight for the faint of heart, it was a brutal ballet of destruction, a testament to the raw power they both wielded. The outcome hung in the balance. Would Gojo's unmatched technique prevail, or would Sukuna's monstrous power overwhelm him? One thing was certain, in this clash of titans, the world itself held its breath, waiting to see who would emerge victorious. Divided by. The air crackled with a tension so thick it felt solid. Gojo, his sapphire eyes narrowed, launched a devastating blue technique. A surge of attractive cursed energy slammed into Sukuna, the king of curses roaring in defiance as the impact sent him skidding backwards. The force of the attack tore through his flesh, leaving gaping wounds that smoked with a sickly green aura. Gojo didn't hesitate. Seizing the advantage, he unleashed a red technique, a burst of repulsive cursed energy. Sukuna, momentarily stunned and weakened by the blue, was caught in its way. He instinctively activated his domain amplification, a desperate attempt to mitigate the damage. But Gojo was already one step ahead. With a chilling smile, Gojo spoke, his voice laced with a deadly calm. "Goodbye," he said, launching into a chilling chant. 9 ropes, polarized light, crow and declaration, between front and back. As the last word left his lips, the blue and red techniques, swirling around Sukuna, merged. A blinding light erupted, a confluence of immense cursed energy, condensing into a sphere of pure destructive potential right on Sukuna's body. This wasn't Gojo's usual unlimited hollow purple. He'd sacrificed its massive 200-meter radius, focusing it entirely on the King of Curses. The condensed technique detonated. A shockwave ripped outwards, pulverizing everything within a 50-meter radius. Buildings crumbled like sandcastles, the very ground beneath them fractured. The force of the blast was unimaginable, a testament to Gojo's unparalleled power. In the heart of the devastation, Sukuna was engulfed by the attack. Would even the King of Curses survive such a direct hit from a technique specifically tailored for his destruction? Only time would tell. Divided by. The dust settled like a shroud over the devastated landscape. Gojo surveyed the scene, his usual carefree grin stretched wide across his face. Sukuna, the once fearsome King of Curses, lay broken and battered. One eye gaped uselessly, an arm seemingly vaporized, and his body a grotesque tapestry of exposed muscle and bone. Someone definitely seen some better days, Gojo chuckled, his amusement evident. But beneath the wreckage, a different story unfolded. Sukuna, his voice barely a rasp, muttered an incantation under his breath, words Gojo couldn't make out. Scale of the dragon, recoil, twin meteors. However, his desperate chant was cut short. From the Inkai depths of his own shadow, a pair of spectral hands materialized. Before Sukuna could react, they latched onto him, a chilling touch that instantly invaded his soul. Panic flared in Sukuna's eyes. Normally, he could expel such intruders with ease, but his weakened state rendered him defenseless. In a heartbeat, his very essence was ripped away from Megumi's body, tossed aside like a discarded rag doll. Sukuna blinked open his eyes, a gasp escaping his lips. His vision landed on Megumi's unconscious form lying on the ground. He, however, stood upright, his form reverted back to his youthful appearance from the Heian era. A shock of realization crossed his face. His gamble, a last-ditch effort, had paid off. He had used his one-time sure-hit reversal technique, sacrificing his current form to heal himself, the moment he felt his soul being ripped away. Gojo's grin faltered for a brief moment, a flicker of surprise crossing his sapphire eyes. He hadn't anticipated this desperate maneuver. The battle wasn't over yet. The King of Curses, battered but unbroken, stood poised for another fight. A maniacal cackle erupted from Sukuna's throat, a sound that sent shivers down Gojo's spine despite his usual nonchalance. Having a body of his own again, even a weakened one, seemed to invigorate the King of Curses. He grinned sadistically, a chilling contrast to the ruined cityscape around them. "Someone going a bit cray-cray in the head," Gojo drawled, his voice still laced with amusement, though a hint of seriousness flickered in his sapphire eyes. This wasn't quite the decisive victory he'd envisioned. From the wreckage, a shadowy hand, seemingly detached from the devastation, reached out and grasped Megumi's unconscious body. With a silent tug, the form vanished into the Inkai depths, whisking the young Jujutsu sorcerer away from the battlefield. Sukuna, his gaze locked on Gojo, spoke, his voice dripping with malice. "I am going to rip away your scale and cut you like a fish." The threat hung heavy in the air, a promise of renewed violence. Gojo simply rolled his eyes, a playful smirk tugging at his lips. "What you finna do?" he mocked, using a slang term that seemed out of place amidst the apocalyptic scene. "Call mommy and daddy to help you." Gojo, a glint of battle lust in his eyes, charged towards Sukuna. Sukuna, deprived of the 10 Shadows technique, met him head-on, unleashing his full might. Capitalizing on his forearms, Sukuna employed domain amplification to bypass Gojo's infinity, before shoving him forcefully in the face. Gojo coughed up blood after absorbing the blow, then retaliated with a forceful blue-infused punch of his own. The two titans clashed, trading blows with ferocious intensity. Neither sorcerer yielded an inch, creating a whirlwind of raw power. Sukuna finally pushed Gojo back. Gojo, utilizing his blue technique, hurled a building towards Sukuna, who promptly dismantled it before impact. Gojo, concealed amongst the debris, landed a surprise attack on a grinning Sukuna. Undeterred, Sukuna lunged for Gojo's gut, only for Gojo to nimbly leap over the attack and deliver a backspinning kick to Sukuna's face. With a swift spin, Gojo attempted a downward axe kick on Sukuna's head. However, Sukuna reacted quickly, blocking the powerful blow with two of his forearms. "Block this," Gojo challenged, a surge of cursed energy emanating from him. As Gojo descended with a smirk, he unleashed a full-powered red technique towards Sukuna's face. In a last-ditch effort, Sukuna activated domain amplification just before the attack landed, mitigating most of the damage. Divided by, the King of Curses reveled in the chaos. This was the battle he craved, a feast fit for a god. Satoru Gojo, a worthy opponent, satiated his hunger for a worthy fight. The tremors racking Sukuna's body weren't from fear, but pure exhilaration. He had finally found a challenge that pushed him to his limits. "Don't disappoint me, Satoru," Sukuna roared, a savage grin splitting his face. Gojo mirrored the battle lust, charging towards him with renewed vigor. The sorcerers became a whirlwind of motion, blows traded with inhuman speed and precision. Kicks met kicks, each attack meticulously countered. "You are strong, Satoru Gojo," Sukuna conceded, a hint of grudging respect in his voice. "But unfortunately for you, that strength only reigns supreme because you were born in a world without me." With a flash of movement, Sukuna seized Gojo's wrists with two of his forearms. The remaining pair formed a hand sign, and a booming voice erupted from his stomach. "Domain expansion, malevolent shrine." Gojo's eyes widened in alarm. He instinctively activated his red technique to create distance, but Sukuna's grip held firm. Gojo feigned a blue attack, a tactic Sukuna recognized just in time to release him. He didn't want to risk another unlimited hollow at point-blank range. As Gojo launched himself away, a barrage of invisible slashes ripped through the air, carving bloody streaks across his body. Reacting on pure instinct, Gojo activated Falling Blossom emotion, mitigating the worst of the damage. Meanwhile, Sukuna stood atop his ominous shrine, a cruel smile playing on his lips. This was his chance. Within the domain, Gojo's infinity was nullified, leaving him vulnerable. It was now or never. "Open," Sukuna commanded, delving into the darkness within his mind. He retrieved a weapon unlike any other, a crackling arrow imbued with both fire and lightning, and aimed it directly at Gojo, unleashing a devastating assault. As Sukuna unleashed the crackling arrow, the monstrous mouth in his belly let out a thunderous roar, chanting, "Scales of the dragon. Repel, twin meteors." With the final syllable, Sukuna performed a devastating dismantle, the air itself warping around his impossibly fast movement. The moment the attack concluded, the stomach boomed again, resuming its chant. Gojo, a whirlwind of blue and red cursed energy, had barely dodged the initial onslaught. The combined efforts of his techniques deflected most of the damage, but before he could fully recover, a searing pain erupted in his left arm. Sukuna's dismantle had been too swift, severing the limb in a clean, brutal slice. Gojo, now a crimson-stained warrior, glared at Sukuna with a mixture of fury and determination. Yet, despite the gruesome wound, his eyes held a steely glint. Would Gojo succumb to the onslaught? Or would he find a way to turn the tide even with a handicap? The battle hung in the balance. Divided by, Satoru Gojo, for the first time in a long time, felt a flicker of unease. The last time he'd felt this way was forgotten. A primal instinct screamed at him that he might actually lose this fight. Yet, the realization only twisted his lips into a feral grin. This wasn't fear, it was exhilarating. Pure, unadulterated excitement coursed through him. With renewed vigor, Gojo dodged a dismantle that would have cleaved him in two. He charged towards Sukuna, abandoning ranged combat for a brutal brawl. Falling Blossom emotion coated his body, mitigating the worst of the onslaught, while his masterful use of the reverse curse technique simultaneously healed his injuries. Impressive, Sukuna conceded, a rare flicker of respect crossing his eyes as Gojo's fist narrowly missed his face, leaving a crater in the concrete. Gojo barely evaded another dismantle that whistled past his neck, leaving a searing wound that instantly knitted itself back together thanks to his technique. The tide of the battle, however, remained firmly in Sukuna's favor. "Open," Sukuna roared mid-fight. An ice shard materialized from the darkness within the domain, hurtling towards Gojo's face. With a last-ditch effort, Gojo contorted his body, narrowly dodging the projectile. The shard slammed into a nearby building, instantly freezing it before shattering the structure into a million pieces. Gojo's eyes widened in realization. Sukuna's domain, the malevolent shrine, seemed to be a repository of various curse techniques. The question gnawed at him: where did Sukuna store them all? His gaze then darted towards Sukuna's markings. Were those the seals? A horrifying realization dawned on Gojo. The black box Sukuna kept accessing wasn't just a gruesome portal, it functioned like a complex program. It acted as a conduit, accepting cursed energy as input and manifesting it as a desired technique. Perhaps Sukuna had delved deeper, unlocking the true potential of the box. Could it be that the King of Curses had essentially mastered a method to copy other sorcerers' techniques? This revelation sent a shiver down Gojo's spine. The implications were dire. If true, Sukuna's power transcended anything they'd previously encountered. And the last part, my own theory, so take it with a grain of salt. For me it's go like this. Sukuna seemed to be the only one with those markings in the whole show, and I was wondering why. I did some research and figure out criminal used to get tattooed in order for normal people to know they were criminals, but I don't think those tattoos will carry over as Sukuna quite literally is in a new body. So I went with the ideas that where he stores some of the curse techniques he has. Either that or that was his punishment for trying to evolve past what a human should. Anyway, as for the black box, after relooking at it, I was like, how this thing sound very much like a computer. You give it data and it give you what you need, so I was like, does this work the same for curse techniques? And so I went with the idea that Sukuna was a Jujutsu scholar and so study the process, and I thought, what would be the best way to get the job done without saying it? And then it hit me. I mean, he could eat, so is a far stretch to say that apart from the fact that he might just be a cannibalism, he is also doing it in order to copy someone's black box or something. And I say the reason Sukuna thought that Jogo wouldn't be aware of the black box is because he is a cursed spirit and basically would never have figured it out, as cursed spirit and human are not the same. I feel like I am high for thinking this, but hey, it is what it is. Pov change. Kenzo, despite his superhuman resilience, couldn't help but feel a twinge of exhaustion as he surveyed the scene. The Dragon Monarch, a grotesque caricature of his former glory, stood amidst the carnage. His body, a canvas of mangled flesh and shattered bone, bore testament to Kenzo's relentless assault. Yet, a feral grin stretched across the monarch's face, a chilling counterpoint to his ravaged form. Yes, the monarch rasped, his voice a guttural growl. This is what I've craved for millennia. His maniacal grin sent shivers down Kenzo's spine. This bastard's a walking tank, Kenzo thought grimly. No matter how much damage he inflicted, the monarch seemed impervious to pain, refusing to yield an inch. The constant manipulation of his mass, the crux of Kenzo's power, was taking its toll. He could feel the strain on his body, his internal organs screaming in protest. His mana reserves dwindled with every passing second. Using his energy to heal internal injuries was manageable, even during combat. However, the problem lay with the damage inflicted by the Dragon Monarch's devastating dragon breath. Those areas were utterly destroyed, erased from existence itself. Healing them was a monumental task. Kenzo had to essentially mend something that was no more. Thankfully, his unique ability allowed him to perceive the very essence of his soul, a blueprint from which he could reconstruct the damage. Yet, the process demanded meticulous control and a staggering amount of mana. In essence, he had to create a perfect copy of the obliterated parts, transforming his mana into a temporary extension of his soul. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Kenzo focused his will. The Dragon Monarch, eyes wide with a mix of awe and disbelief, watched as Kenzo's wounds visibly knitted themselves back together at an impossible speed. The tide of the battle, it seemed, was far from settled. Divided by. Kenzo inhaled deeply, a steely resolve hardening his gaze. He clenched his fist, muttering under his breath, "Screw it." The words resonated with a raw determination. As the curse broke his lips, his entire being seemed to heave. His mass surged, expanding to an immense level. In a blink, Kenzo materialized directly in front of the Dragon Monarch. A devastating punch, fueled by sheer mass and amplified by his technique, Thin Ice Breaker, tore through the Dragon Monarch's defenses. The blow landed with a sickening thud, bypassing any attempt at resistance. The Dragon Monarch lurched back, a guttural cough erupting from his chest as blood splattered across the ground. Yet, a deranged grin stretched across his face, even as a gaping hole marred his abdomen. "Let's see who falls first, you or me," he roared, charging recklessly toward Kenzo. His body crackled with power, wreathed in a blazing inferno of his own breath. Kenzo, acutely aware of his dwindling reserves, knew this was a fight he couldn't afford to drag out. He met the Dragon Monarch head-on, their clash sending shockwaves rippling through the very fabric of his domain. Despite its construction as a barrier, the sheer magnitude of their confrontation resonated outwards, causing tremors to rock the world beyond. Within the confines of Shinjuku, cracks materialized in the air, a testament to the titanic battle unfolding within. Across the battlefield, Sukuna's gaze briefly caught sight of one of those shimmering fissures. The raw power coursing through them ignited a spark of exhilaration in his eyes. Gojo, on the other hand, reacted differently. As he witnessed the cracks in the world, a single thought slammed into him. His student was out there, pushing himself to the limit. He had to end this fight, and fast. The fate of the Jujutsu world hinged on both battles reaching their climax. Divided by. So, that's the key, Sukuna muttered to himself, a predatory grin splitting his face. Gojo's eyes narrowed as he witnessed a shift in Sukuna's cursed energy. It crackled with a faint blue luminescence, eerily similar to Kenzo's mana. This wasn't good. This is exhilarating. Sukuna roared, his voice laced with a manic edge. Before Gojo could react, countless elemental arrows materialized behind him, imbued with a potent blend of cursed energy and mana. Let's see how you handle a test run, Sukuna taunted, his smile stretching wider. Gojo cursed under his breath, dodging the barrage of arrows, each one capable of wreaking havoc, demanded his full focus. His eyes darted across the battlefield, scanning for Sukuna's next move. Suddenly, a sharp pain lanced through him. A dismantle slash, formed entirely from flickering blue mana, had severed his right arm clean off. Gojo's eyes widened in shock. He hadn't seen it coming. Then, a chilling realization dawned on him. The dismantle was fueled by mana, not cursed energy. His 6 eyes, honed to perceive cursed energy flow, had been completely blindsided. However, amidst the chaos, Gojo noticed a crucial detail. Sukuna's newly acquired technique wasn't perfect. A faint signature of cursed energy still lingered within the mana, unlike Kenzo's pure energy. This imperfection, this vulnerability, might just be his only chance. In a flash of blue light, Gojo materialized directly behind Sukuna, unleashing a powerful kick that sent the King of Curses flying. Before Sukuna could recover, a shadowy hand, conjured with cursed energy, materialized around Gojo's waist, deflecting an invisible slash aimed at his core. Reacting instinctively, Gojo activated his reverse curse technique, both arms reforming flawlessly in an instant. With renewed determination, he launched a full-powered red technique towards Sukuna's face, propelling him several meters back. A triumphant smile played on Gojo's lips as he uttered a devastating sequence of words: 9 ropes. Polarized light, crow, and declaration. Between front and back, Sukuna's eyes widened in alarm. He recognized the chant. Gojo was unleashing his trump card, the hollow purple. Without wasting a moment, Sukuna countered by activating domain amplification, a desperate attempt to shield himself from the attack's devastating effects. But Gojo had anticipated this move. With a decisive battle cry, he declared, domain expansion, unlimited void. The battlefield was consumed by an inkai blackness, Gojo's personal domain. One crucial detail differentiated this domain from before: it resonated with a faint blue luminescence, evidence of Gojo's countermeasure against Kenzo-like abilities. This domain was specifically designed to be 200% more effective against opponents wielding mana, a fact that wouldn't escape Sukuna now. A cruel smile stretched across Gojo's face as he witnessed the instantaneous effect on Sukuna, the potent anti-mana properties of the domain taking hold. Seems like the only reason you weren't a factor in your era is because I was around, Sukuna, he taunted. Gojo dropped into a fighting stance, his hand crackling with cursed energy as he began the chant for his ultimate technique. First, the blue phase, Twilight, Eyes of Wisdom. Then, the red phase, Paramita, Pillars of Light. And finally, the culmination, the hollow purple, 9 ropes, Polarized Light, Crow, and Declaration. Between front and back, with a mighty roar, Gojo unleashed the attack, a concentrated sphere of annihilation aimed directly at Sukuna. To ensure maximum impact, Gojo even targeted himself with the attack, leaving no room for error. His goal was simple: to obliterate Sukuna and himself in a single, devastating blow. Kenzo gathered his remaining strength, channeling everything he had into a single, devastating punch. He infused his fist with an unimaginable amount of mass, cocking it back in a display of raw power. The Dragon Monarch, ever the showman, grinned menacingly before unleashing a torrent of fire aimed directly at Kenzo's fist. Ignoring the searing inferno, Kenzo pressed onward. He felt the fire devour the defenses he'd meticulously constructed around his fist, erasing them from existence. Pain seared through his hand, but he wouldn't falter. With gritted teeth, he pushed his fist closer, inch by agonizing inch, towards the monarch's face. The monarch reveled in Kenzo's struggle, convinced that this would be the knight's final stand. Victory seemed within his grasp, another warrior reduced to mere dust. But before he could react further, the world flipped on its axis. The monarch found himself staring at his own back, a sickening feeling of dread creeping into his chest. As his gaze darted behind him, his eyes widened in disbelief. A towering knight, clad in obsidian armor, stood sentinel, its hand resting firmly on the back of the monarch's neck. Life drained from the monarch's eyes as he witnessed Kenzo's silhouette, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "That was a good fight," Kenzo said softly, his voice laced with exhaustion. A final, chilling smile stretched across the monarch's face before his entire being dissolved into a shower of light particles. His reign of terror finally ended. Kenzo's eyes shifted towards his savior, the loyal knight Igris. "Took you long enough," he remarked with a hint of amusement, despite his fatigue. Igris bowed deeply. "Forgive the delay, my liege." "No worries," Kenzo sighed, fatigue finally overwhelming him. He crumpled onto the ground, his domain flickering and collapsing around them. As darkness claimed his vision for a fleeting moment, Kenzo's eyes fluttered open again. The scene that greeted him was one of devastation. A mountain of slain dragons lay before him, each one felled by his shadow soldiers. In the distance, Belian sat stoically amidst a pile of what seemed like thousands of dead dragons. Finally, Kenzo's gaze settled on his own hand, the charred evidence of the dragon monarch's final attack. A grimace flickered across his face, a stark reminder of the brutal battle he'd just endured. Divided by. Across the battlefield, Yuta Akatsu was locked in a desperate struggle against Yagumont, the monarch of Transfiguration. Yuta, wielding his cursed sword, launched a series of fierce slashes, but Yagumont displayed an uncanny dodge ability, effortlessly evading each attack. Yuta pressed on, closing the distance and thrusting his hand towards Yagumont's face. As their fingers brushed, a strange symbol materialized above Yuta's mouth. He opened his mouth and uttered a single, powerful word: freeze. The effect was instantaneous. Yagumont's body locked up, his cursed energy flow halted in its tracks. Seizing on this golden opportunity, Yuta conjured a powerful boxing glove made of cursed energy. He materialized behind the frozen Yagumont, landing a devastating blow to the monarch's face. Yagumont, propelled backwards by the impact, roared in frustration. But amidst his fury, a chilling realization dawned on him. His soul, his very essence, felt a foreign touch. Before he could react further, Yuta reappeared behind him, his hand pressed firmly against Yagumont's back. Like a conduit, Yuta's cursed energy flowed directly into the monarch, attempting to transfigure his soul. Yagumont's defenses kicked in, his cursed energy lashing out at Yuta, forcing him to break contact. Gasping for breath, Yagumont glared at Yuta, his body radiating a dark aura. His transfiguration had been reversed, but the attack had left him visibly weakened. "Did you truly believe a simple touch would be my undoing?" Yagumont taunted, his voice dripping with malice. Yuta remained silent, his determination hardening. He reached down, his fingers brushing against a ring adorned with a skull emblem on his right hand. He muttered a single name, his resolve resonating in the word, Rika. Divided by. Yuta, fueled by a renewed sense of purpose, launched a relentless assault on Yagumont. Rika, a specter of raw power, materialized beside him, their movements a blur of coordinated strikes. They targeted Yagumont's weaknesses with pinpoint precision, exploiting every blind spot and chink in his armor. This battle had stretched on for a grueling eternity. Yuta, despite his vast reserves of cursed energy replenished by Rika's presence, craved a swift resolution. He couldn't afford to expend all his energy here. Ending this fight quickly meant aiding his comrades elsewhere. But Yagumont proved to be a tenacious foe, not due to his own strength, but the constant interference of his mage army. Those infuriating sorcerers seemed to possess a spell for every occasion. Yuta had noticed the pattern. Each time he unleashed a different curse technique, a specific mage countered it with a nullifying spell, effectively reducing the damage. Another mage, ever vigilant, healed Yagumont's wounds, ensuring his longevity. With hundreds of thousands of soldiers at Yagumont's disposal, a war of attrition loomed. Eradicating them all felt like an insurmountable feat. Yuta gritted his teeth. He needed a new strategy, a way to bypass these infuriating tactics and strike a decisive blow against Yagumont himself. Divided by. Yuta, his mind a whirlwind of strategy, formulated a desperate plan. He knew a direct assault, no matter how powerful, would be thwarted by the relentless mages. A flicker of movement caught his eye, a slight shift in Yagumont's stance, betraying the monarch's growing fatigue. This was his chance. With a silent command, Yuta channeled a surge of cursed energy into Rika. She materialized beside him, a spectral blur, her chilling presence drawing the attention of the mage battalion. In that split second, Yuta vanished from sight, a technique he'd honed to perfection. The mages, momentarily distracted by Rika's sudden appearance, were caught off guard. Yuta reappeared behind Yagyamunt, a whisper away from his target. Rika, understanding his intent, maintained her assault, her spectral form a chaotic whirlwind, momentarily obstructing the mage's view. This was Yuta's window. With a surge of cursed energy, Yuta unleashed his most potent technique, Spear of Longinus. A spear of pure cursed energy materialized in his hand, crackling with an ominous power. In a single, swift motion, Yuta thrust the spear forward, aiming for the nape of Yagyamunt's neck, a vital point, unprotected by any lingering effects of the healing mage's curse. Pav change. Tarnak, the Iron Monarch, roared in frustration. The upstart child, Yuji, weaved around him like a net, each black flash leaving a smoldering crater on his otherwise impervious hide. Tarnak swung a fist, the wind whistling as it displaced air, but Yuji was already a blur, his dark form materializing a hair's breadth away. Another black flash, aimed at Tarnak's kneecap, sent a shockwave through the metallic limb. Pain, a sensation Tarnak had almost forgotten, flared. He bellowed again, but the sound was cut short as a crimson mist erupted in his face. Yuji, battered and bruised, grinned back, his eyes blazing with a dark fire. The spark of black pulsed within him, a chaotic counterpoint to the stoic iron that was Tarnak's essence. Here, in the heart of the battleground, the impossible was unfolding. The tide began to turn. Tarnak, fueled by a white-hot rage, roared anew. His metallic hide, momentarily weakened by the relentless black flashes, seemed to mend itself under the inferno of his fury. His blows grew wilder, but their raw power became undeniable. One massive swing of his arm caught Yuji full on, the sickening crunch of bone meeting metal echoing through the battlefield. Yuji sent flying, a broken doll ragdolling through the air before slamming into the ground. A haze clouded his vision, the metallic tang of blood filling his mouth. Tarnak loomed over him, a look of pure disgust twisting his iron features. Pathetic, he spat, raising a fist the size of a melon to finish Yuji off. Just as the fist descended, a glint of silver flashed through the air. Tarnak, with a surprised grunt, twisted away, the fist smashing harmlessly into the ground. A thrown blade, spinning end over end, sailed past his ear. He turned his gaze towards Yuji, expecting a flicker of defiance, only to find the boy lying still, seemingly unconscious. A cruel smirk played on Tarnak's lips. "Foolish child," he bellowed, his voice laced with contempt. "Did you truly think such a pathetic attack?" The smirk died mid-sentence. A searing pain erupted in his chest, a crimson blossom blooming where there had been only cold, unyielding metal moments before. Tarnak looked down, his eyes widening in disbelief. Embedded in his chest was the very blade he'd dodged. But the hand holding it wasn't Yuji's. He spun around, his gaze landing on a figure that had materialized from thin air behind him. A woman with hair the color of spring grass stood there, her gold eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Blood dripped from the tip of the katana held loosely in her hand. Tarnak, for the first time in millennia, felt a tremor of fear course through his being. "Who are you?" he rasped, a metallic tang now accompanying the blood in his mouth. The woman's lips curved into a smile devoid of warmth. "Your killer," she replied, her voice a chilling whisper. And in that single, icy utterance, Tarnak knew his reign of iron was at its end. "Yuji, get up," Maki barked, her voice sharp with urgency. Below her, Yuji pushed himself to his feet, a grimace contorting his face. But even as he did, a soft green glow emanated from his body, visible even through his tattered clothes. His wounds, the brutal toll of Tarnak's attack, were already knitting themselves back together. "Thanks, Maki-senpai," he managed, offering a weak smile. Maki didn't respond, her eyes already scanning the battlefield beyond where Tarnak had stood. "Are you healed enough to continue, or do you need a break?" Her voice was a flat monotone, devoid of concern but laced with a practicality born of countless battles. Yuji nodded, his determination hardening. "I'm fine." "Then keep up," she said curtly before taking off in a blur of motion. Yuji, adrenaline coursing through his veins, pushed himself after her, his body still protesting but his spirit unyielding. Across the battlefield, another fight raged. Hakari, a whirlwind of chaotic energy, danced around Baron, the White Flame Monarch. Both men, their faces split in wide, feral grins, were locked in a berserker's embrace. Strategy had been abandoned long ago. Now, it was a brutal dance of raw power. Each blow met with another, neither man giving an inch, neither one flinching from the inferno that surrounded them. They were two unstoppable forces, locked in a collision that threatened to tear the battlefield apart. Hikari was a whirlwind of uncontrolled fury. His movements were a chaotic ballet, a wild mix of spinning kicks and haymaker punches. His laughter echoed across the battlefield, a manic counterpoint to the crackling white flames that danced around Baron. The White Flame Monarch was a force of nature himself. A hulking figure clad in white-hot armor, Baron met Hikari's blows head-on. His fists, wreathed in white fire, slammed into Hikari's chest with the force of a battering ram. Sparks erupted wherever their attacks met, momentarily eclipsing the flames surrounding Baron. They traded blows with a ferocity that bordered on insanity. Hikari, a blur of motion, landed a glancing blow on Baron's cheek, leaving a sizzling scorch mark. Baron roared in response, a gout of white flame erupting from his mouth that singed Hikari's hair. They grappled, a tangle of limbs and fire, their laughter and roars blending into a single, cacophonous war cry. Neither one of them seemed to care about defense. Every blow they landed was met with another, a brutal testament to their raw power. The ground beneath them cracked and crumbled, and the air shimmered with the heat radiating from their clash. The clash continued, a barbaric symphony of fire and fury. Baron, fueled by his own rage, fought like a cornered beast, each blow a desperate attempt to put Hikari down. But Hikari, a grinning menace amidst the inferno, seemed to grow stronger with every exchange. His punches and kicks, once wild and erratic, began to find their mark with a sickening regularity. Here was the difference. Baron, for all his power, was a dwindling ember. His white flames, once blindingly intense, flickered with desperation. Every blow he landed cost him precious stamina, precious heat. Hikari, however, was a bonfire fed by an unseen source. With each jackpot in his idle death gamble domain, he received a fresh surge of cursed energy, seemingly limitless in this current role. The tide turned subtly at first. Hikari, dodging a wild swing from Baron, managed to land a solid punch to the monarch's chest. The impact sent Baron staggering back, a flicker of excitement replacing the fury in his eyes for the first time. He roared, summoning a final, desperate torrent of white flame. But Hikari, with a joyous laugh, wove through it like a dancer in a fiery waltz. The final blow was a blur. Hikari, fueled by another jackpot, unleashed a roundhouse kick that connected with Baron's jaw with the force of a battering ram. The White Flame Monarch, his fire extinguished, crumpled to the ground, a broken doll amidst the cooling embers. Hikari stood above him, panting slightly, but a triumphant grin still plastered across his face. He raised a fist to the sky, the sound of his laughter echoing across the battlefield. He had gambled, he had rolled the dice, and fate, for now, was firmly in his pocket. Kenzo winced as his body knit itself back together, the aftermath of a brutal fight leaving him sore and stiff. He pushed himself to his feet, following the faint echo of Gojo's cursed energy signature. The sight that greeted him was both surprising and unsettling. Gojo's domain, a sight usually as breathtaking as it was terrifying, was in tatters. Shards of infinity shimmered like broken glass, swirling around the figure of the white-haired sorcerer who sat slumped against a ruined pillar. Burns marred Gojo's normally flawless skin, a deep crimson that even his regenerative abilities were struggling to fully erase. Someone seems like they had a hard time, Kenzo managed, his voice raspy from exertion. Gojo, ever the showman, flashed him a grin despite his evident exhaustion. Nah, this was light work. His voice came out raspy, a stark contrast to his usual nonchalant drawl. Kenzo raised a skeptical eyebrow. Yeah, and you want me to believe that when you look like a walking barbecue. Gojo's pristine white coat was now a tattered mess, smoke curling from singed edges. Blood trickled down his temple, painting a gruesome line across his cheek. He looked, for the first time in Kenzo's memory, truly worse for wear. A chuckle escaped Gojo's lips, tinged with a hint of self-deprecation. Just got myself a very bad tan, he said, his usual playful glint dimmed but not extinguished. Kenzo's already depleted reserves of energy drained further at the sight. Exhaustion pulled at him, dragging him down. He collapsed onto his back with a groan, eyes scanning the battlefield where their comrades continued their fight. And look who's talking, Gojo said, a hint of amusement in his voice as he spotted Kenzo's state. Kenzo simply grunted in response, mustering the energy for a weak retort. Apparently dragon breath isn't exactly good for a tan either, he mumbled, the memory of the scorching attack still fresh. Gojo let out a soft laugh, a sound rough around the edges. Heh, it could have been worse. At least you're not dead. Kenzo cracked a tired smile. Should we help them? He managed, gesturing towards the ongoing battles. Gojo tilted his head back, gazing at the sky where wisps of his shattered domain lingered. A serene smile played on his lips. Nah, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Leave it to them. They can handle it. So, the two strongest Jujutsu sorcerers on the battlefield lay there, drained but far from defeated. They were the unshakable pillars, the last line of defense, and for now, they watched, their trust in their comrades a silent testament to their unwavering strength. Divided by. Kenzo's question hung in the air, a comedic counterpoint to the tense atmosphere of the battlefield. Gojo-sensei, on a scale of 1 to 10, how willing would you be to get your soul touched? Gojo, ever the enigma, blinked once, then twice, processing the unexpected query. Excuse me, he drawled, a hint of amusement creeping into his voice. Just asking if you'd let Mahito fix you up, Kenzo clarified, gesturing towards the shadowy figure that materialized beside Gojo. Mahito, ever the opportunist, wasted no time. Tendrils of his cursed energy reaching out to Kenzo, his form solidifying as he began the process of reshaping Kenzo's battered soul. Gojo chuckled, a deep rumble that echoed despite his weakened state. No, I don't feel like being touched today. Gotta keep my soul virginity intact, you know. He winked at Kenzo, his usual flippancy returning, albeit slightly dimmed. Kenzo blinked, processing the absurdity of Gojo's statement. He had grown accustomed to his sensei's brand of humor, yet this took the cake. Still, a small smile played on his lips. He had achieved his goal, a new friend for Gojo, a sense of connection that had previously been absent. Looking around the battlefield, Kenzo saw his comrades locked in battle, each pushing their limits. He had played his part, protecting his friends, his world, from the onslaught of the monarchs. As long as those monstrous entities remained at bay, a fragile peace existed. And for now, that was enough. Divided by. The dust of war settled, a heavy, acrid blanket over the land. The remnants of the battle with the monarchs were a stark reminder of the devastation they had almost wrought. Kenzo, his body a canvas of faded scars, stood amidst the ruins, a weary but resolute figure. He offered a brief, yet genuine, thanks to each of his comrades who had stood shoulder to shoulder against the monstrous threat. The gratitude in his eyes, a reflection of the burden they had shared, needed no further words. It was a silent pact forged in the crucible of battle, a bond solidified by the blood and sweat spilled in defense of their world. His next mission, a resolute glint hardening his gaze, was a solitary one. Urom, the enigmatic servant of Sukuna, had to be silenced. He hunted her down with the relentless focus of a predator, her demise a grim necessity. But what of Sukuna himself? Though the king of curses lay vanquished, his soul, a potent and volatile entity, remained. Memories flickered across Kenzo's mind. A time not so long ago, a conversation fueled by potent narcotics, a fleeting dream that felt more like a fevered hallucination. In those hazy moments, the notion of binding Sukuna to his will seemed a fantastical impossibility, a madman's rant. Yet, here he stood, the impossible a stark reality. With a surge of cursed energy, a dark tendril lashed out, coiling around the disembodied soul of Sukuna. The air crackled with malevolent power as the king of curses roared in defiance, a sound that resonated within Kenzo's very being. But the binding held, a testament to Kenzo's mastery and the desperation of the situation. Thus, the king of curses became a twisted shadow soldier, a chained beast forever tethered to Kenzo's will. A chilling victory, a Faustian bargain etched in cursed energy. Years flowed by, a peaceful interlude after the storm. The world, scarred but resilient, began to heal. Kenzo, once a warrior honed by conflict, found himself in an unexpected role, a father. In his arms, a tiny tyrant with eyes the same shade of brown as his own, mewled and gurgled. It was his son, a new life born from the ashes of war, a testament to the love he shared with his partner amidst the chaos. The little one, with a grip that belied his size, yanked on a strand of Kenzo's hair, eliciting a surprised yelp. Kenzo, despite himself, couldn't help but chuckle. "For a small guy, you sure are strong," he said, his voice tinged with amusement and a touch of pride. The baby, oblivious to the chaos he was causing, rewarded him with a gummy smile, his eyes sparkling with a primal joy that mirrored the warmth blooming in Kenzo's chest. At that moment, the weight of the world seemed to melt away. Here, in the quiet chaos of his son's laughter, Kenzo found a different kind of strength, a tenderness that surprised him. Divided by. "What in the world has Maki been feeding you?" Kenzo chuckled, hoisting the little one higher in his arms. Despite his son's small stature, the grip on his hair was surprisingly strong. This child, born from the union of the heavenly restriction and the shadow monarch, was practically destined for greatness. He possessed his mother's impressive physique, a perfect canvas for the immense reserves of mana he'd undoubtedly inherit from Kenzo. This little bundle of boundless energy was a constant source of amusement, a whirlwind of giggles and flailing limbs. "He'd make a fine warrior, my liege," chimed a voice from Kenzo's shadow. A miniature Bellion materialized on his shoulder, its scaled body gleaming like polished obsidian. "Nonsense," came Igra's retort, another shadowy presence solidifying beside Bellion. This time it was a miniature version of the divine general, his fiery mane seemingly reduced to a playful tuft of red hair. The young league should be schooled in the marvels of engineering. Kenzo rolled his eyes, a familiar warmth spreading through him as his internal shadow soldiers bickered. No matter the situation, they always managed to lighten the mood. One thing was certain, Kento's future was his own to decide. No shadowy advisors, however well-intentioned, would dictate his path. Kento, oblivious to the debate unfolding around him, rewarded Kenzo with a radiant smile, a perfect reflection of his father's own. "Good boy," Kenzo cooed, his voice thick with affection. "Let's have a little adventure while your mama catches some sleep, shall we?" The baby gurgled in agreement, his bright eyes sparkling with mischief. With a silent flick of his wrist, Kenzo activated his mama, teleporting them both away from their home in a blink. The familiar rooftop of the city's tallest structure greeted them, the sprawling cityscape twinkling like a sea of fireflies below. The world stretched before them, a canvas of endless possibilities. Kenzo, with his son nestled securely in his arms, felt a surge of determination. Kenzo cradled his son close, their laughter echoing amidst the wind whipping around the rooftop. But the sound was abruptly cut short as a familiar presence snagged at his senses. He turned to see Gojo, a youthful grin plastered on his face despite the years that had passed. Time seemed to have bypassed the white-haired sorcerer altogether. Kento babbled, reaching out with a chubby hand toward Gojo. The corners of Gojo's eyes crinkled with amusement as he scooped the child into his arms. Kento giggled, his tiny fingers tugging playfully at Gojo's blindfold. "Not old, am I?" Gojo teased, his voice carrying its usual lighthearted lilt. Kenzo chuckled. "Well, you're not exactly 28 anymore, Gojo-sensei. Middle-aged, maybe." Gojo feigned offense, clutching his chest dramatically. "Middle-aged? Don't you dare tarnish my youthful image, Kenzo." A playful glint flickered in his eyes. Despite the playful jabs, a quiet contentment settled over Kenzo. Gojo's comment, while exaggerated, held a sliver of truth. Time was a relentless river, and even the strongest swimmers eventually felt its current. He looked back at the sprawling city below, the twinkling lights painting a peaceful tableau. 9 years. 9 years of relative peace, a hard-won serenity that tasted sweeter with every passing day. A pang of nostalgia tugged at his heart. He should visit Yuji and Yuko Ozawa soon. He'd heard whispers of them having a kid recently, a testament to their happiness. And Megumi, his stoic friend, had finally shed his gloomy shell and started dating someone. It was good to see them all settled, building lives outside the constant struggle against cursed spirits. This peace, though fragile, was precious. Despite the lull, his training hadn't faltered. Maki, ever the vigilant warrior, wouldn't let him slip into complacency. His strength, honed further over the years, remained a bulwark against any unforeseen threats. But for now, beneath the starlit sky, he held his son close, the warmth radiating from the small body a comforting counterpoint to the cool night air. Gojo's playful banter filled the quiet, a reminder of their shared bonds, their unwavering camaraderie. At that moment, amidst the quiet laughter and the twinkling city lights, Kenzo knew this peace was worth protecting, worth fighting for with every last drop of his cursed energy and mana. For this was their future, a future he had helped forge, a future filled with the promise of laughter, love, and a world bathed in the gentle light of dawn. In the end, I did say this story would end in March, and it did anyway. You all got a week to vote left, and the vote closes at noon on Sunday next week. I will see who wins it once and for all. Someone with Manado ability and JJK. Someone with Gojo ability and Genshin Impact. I had my fun writing this side story, learned some stuff, and may or may not have pulled some BS out of my ass to make some stuff work. Canon ship. Kenzo x Maki, Yuji x Yuko, Megumi x. I do feel like Gojo will just become a DILF. He is quite literally scared of women. And Jeej himself said he couldn't stay loyal to one woman, but if that wasn't a problem then the ship would have been. Gojo x Yudaheim. Anyway, this little section is where you rate the story and tell me some flaws you found that I can fix and something that I do right that I should keep up. Kind of need them in order to improve.